Good morning. The world holds its breath as Israel launches an attack on Iran.
Israeli governments fire a barrage of missiles on military targets across Iran in the latest escalation of the conflict, which fears that Tehran, where there are fears now that Tehran could retaliate.
Well, Number 10 says it's monitoring the situation closely, claiming further escalation is in no one's interest.
And this comes as closer to home. Chancellor Rachel Reeves insists Sir Keir Starmer is a working person, meaning that he could be shielded from tax rises in the autumn budget.
King Charles says he hopes he survives long enough to see Samoa again as he bids farewell to the Pacific Islands.
And this comes as the reparation row intensifies, with rumours that Sir Keir Starmer could offer non-cash options to Commonwealth nations.
Here's a treat for everyone living in the UK, as long as you're not doing an overnight shift, of course, as the clocks will go back tonight, meaning you should get an extra hour of sleep.
Good morning. It's a big day in the Premier League with Manchester City and Aston Villa both in action. Nottingham Forest, meanwhile, moved up to 5th last night with a win at East Midlands rivals Leicester. The Lionesses were edged out at Wembley, and we'll hear why Jamie Redknapp never followed his father, Harry, into football management.
Hello, good morning. Lots of fine weather around this weekend, but not for all. If you want to know where the wet and windy weather's going to be, then stay tuned for all the details.
It's just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is GB News Breakfast.
I've come up with a dilemma in the papers this morning. Something I've never heard of. Apparently there's a big row brewing over what to do with your Sunday roast. Because 1 in 10 adults in the UK think that you should have a fried egg.
What, with
on
your
a
Sunday roast?
I've never heard of that.
Never heard of that.
Aidan?
No, never, ever, ever. No, I've heard it on top of a pizza and things like that, but not...
Fried egg on a pizza?
Yeah, I've
You
seen
get
it.
that, don't you?
Yeah. Most of the restaurants will offer that. It just seems a bit peculiar to me. But I've noticed eggs have not agreed with me much.
Where are you meant to put it? Just in the line-up on your plate?
Just on your plate. There's also a big row about mashed potatoes. Do you have mashed potatoes?
I think you have a range of potatoes.
See, I don't like mashed potatoes on a roast.
Oh, I love mashed potatoes,
I do.
but I love roast.
But
as
also
well.
gravy. Well, of course you have.
Of course, you have gravy.
thought so, yeah.
It's the most
Gravy
important
with
thing.
everything.
Absolutely.
I would've thought so.
Now, I have a row with my boys because with a Sunday roast, I have mint sauce, and they say that doesn't
with beef?
belong. Well, you see, I don't eat the meat
Oh, no.
anyway. So with a veggie version of a
Well, you
Sunday
can have what
roast.
you like, then.
Well, I think so. I love mint sauce. Mint sauce and gravy on potatoes is the best in the world.
These people say you can't have baked beans on a fry-up. I mean, it's nonsense, isn't it?
What? You can't? Sorry, what?
Yeah,
Lots of people-
no,
lots
I
of people
saw that.
claim-
Was,
yeah, lots of
it was a
people say
news
that you
story
can't.
about a week or two ago, wasn't it? That you shouldn't have baked beans with a full English breakfast.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
No, it's a bit dry otherwise, isn't it? But what annoys me when you go into these fancy pubs around London or wherever on a weekend and you go for a Sunday roast, and they don't have smother the plate with a huge Yorkshire pudding. Do you not find that? Just make it as big as possible.
Yes.
So that, I mean, you know, sometimes just plonked on the top. I just find it smothers the plate a little bit.
I do like a lot of yours.
I wonder if that's economic, though, because Yorkshire puddings were sort of invented, weren't they, because they were cheap?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
would
a
imagine
very
so,
cheap
yeah.
and easy way to fill your stomach.
See, this is a survey by EDF, the energy company, and they're saying the average roast takes 4 hours to cook. What are you doing? 4 hours?
Well, it depends how big your turkey or chicken is.
Yeah, I
doesn't
guess
it,
so,
really?
yeah.
God, it has to be huge to
Yeah,
take
it
4
would have
hours.
to be big.
Anyway, so there you go. So let us know. gbnews.com/your say. Are you one of the 10% who insist on a fried egg on your Sunday roast?
And where does the whole idea come from?
I'm slightly baffled by
And
that.
I'm also annoyed to find that I'm not a working person. Are you? You're not a working person.
Nor am I.
No, you're not.
It's I don't know. It's very hard to work it out from they keep changing the mind of what a working
Well, Keir
person is.
Starmer says, and he should know, because he's the one who brought the whole argument forward, that if you've got enough money to get you out of a hole, there was a financial problem in the next week and you had enough money to be able to write a cheque and go, phew, then you're
if
not a
your boiler
working
broke
person.
down or whatever. Yeah. Yes, well, but apparently he is a working person.
Yeah.
And yet he's got, according to, I was just looking it up this morning, apparently he's got 7.7 million quid. That's what he's worth.
Assets.
And he's a working person, but we're not.
But I bet he could write a cheque to get out of a hole next week.
And pensioners aren't working people.
And they've worked their entire lives and paid tax their entire lives, and yet they're deemed to be not a working man. It really gets steam
when
coming
you buy
out
a
of my
rental
ears.
property, you pay tax when you buy it. You pay tax on any income you get during the lifetime of the property, and you have to pay an increased amount of tax. We think now when you sell it, it's disgraceful, in my view.
Well, let us know what you think on all of that, of course, as you always do. But we'll start with some breaking news overnight, and that is coming on from these attacks from Israel onto Tehran, targeted attacks, apparently. Well, the government here has said escalation is in no one's interest in response to that attack.
The world, if you like, had been bracing for retaliatory strikes against the Iranian regime since Tehran launched a barrage of more than 180 ballistic missiles at Israel 3 weeks ago.
Well, the Israeli Defence Force says they will do whatever is necessary to defend the state.
So a lot of people are...
The Israel Defense Forces is conducting precise strikes on military targets in Iran. Our defensive and offensive capabilities are fully mobilized. We will do whatever necessary to defend the state of Israel and the people of Israel.
Well, joining us now, former British Army spokesperson Major General Mike Shearer. Good morning, Mike. I guess this was inevitable, wasn't it?
I think so, but thank you for the promotion. It's just major, I'm afraid. But, I mean, you were saying that people are saying that escalation is in no one's interest. I'm afraid I would disagree. And I know that most people are saying they don't want escalation, but I think that's exactly what Israel needs to do. I mean, they are now fighting, I think, on 7 fronts, all of which, of course, are proxies of Iran. You've got Hamas, Hezbollah, the West Bank, Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, and it goes on. There is no question that the Israelis are on the front foot here. And the only reason this problem in the Middle East has persisted for the decades that it has is because just as Israel get close to completing and finishing the problem, they're always stopped by the United States. So I would say that Israel are absolutely on the front foot, and they should go on. I know that they've said that their strikes for the time being is done, but I suspect there's a bit more to come yet.
Where does this leave us here in the UK, Mike, in terms of heightened tensions here, possibility of, especially if we get in, or as we are to an extent anyway, but more involved in this situation, does this put us on a heightened footing here?
Yeah, I suspect it probably, the truth is it probably does. But I'm afraid that is our own internal security issues. Let's not forget, despite the general tone of the international community, it would appear that Israel and the IDF are the perpetrators here. Let's not forget who started this. Let's not forget the 7th of October, and then immediately on the 8th when Hezbollah joined in. I have researched and researched. Look, I've been dealing with the law of armed conflict within customary international law fairly much all my life, because nobody wants to get that wrong when you're holding a weapon. And I can assure you that Israel has not broken any customary international laws, and indeed the serious part of that with regarding this conflict is the law of armed conflict. They are perfectly within their right to be doing what they're doing, and they are responding. They are not the aggressor.
So what happens next? Do we wait for other countries, I mean ourselves, America, to make some sort of a response, or are we just sitting back and waiting to see what happens next?
Well, I know that if my memory serves me right, I think there are peace talks planned for this weekend in Qatar. And I suspect people will be worrying whether this now puts that on ice. I suspect not. Look, peace could occur tomorrow if Hezbollah and Hamas put their weapons down, Hamas release the hostages, and they present themselves and say, we're done. Of course, that is not likely to happen. But there is the peace formula right there. It's not complicated. Again, the noise from the international community is that Israel is endangering civilian life. No, they're not. It is Hamas and Hezbollah that are endangering civilian life. The ugly term of collateral damage, it is a thing, and it is permitted within the law of armed conflict to have civilian casualties if it fits within the stated military objective and military advantage. And everything that I've seen so far says that it is.
OK. Major Mike Shearer, good to get your perspective this morning. Thanks very much indeed. It is going to be an interesting one, though, to see how we react over here. There will be people taking to the streets because that's just what happens these days. And they're within their right to do so, as long as it's all done peacefully, of course. But does this lead to more tensions on the streets of the UK? Are we going to have further problems? Do we need to be on higher alert? Hard to say at the minute, but we've got to be aware of these sort of things because everything has a consequence, doesn't it? Even for us, a long way away.
And a context, I think, as well, because I think a lot of the people who take to the streets are only seeing it from one point of view. And I just wish sometimes they would take more of an overview or an objective view. And that's what we obviously try to give you here on GB News. It really is.
Now, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, brace yourselves for this one, has insisted that Sir Keir Starmer is a working person, which doesn't seem to fit in with his own definition of a working person. So that means he could be amongst those protected from the government's controversial tax hikes in the budget on Wednesday.
Number 10 has then faced backlash over its definition of a working person, suggesting that those with assets, property and savings could be hit with tax rises, as if Keir Starmer hasn't got any of those.
About 7.7 million quid, apparently. We're joined by former Middlesbrough Mayor and political commentator now, Andy Preston. Morning, Andy. It just seems like they've got themselves as an absolute model with this turn of phrase, which has ended up being so important.
Hi, Stephen. Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Absolutely. They're in a massive muddle, and it's their own making. And everyone's confused, aren't they, about a working person? I don't know, George Soros, David Beckham, the part-time cleaner, who is and who isn't. The truth is, tax should be really simple. It's really painful. Everyone hates it. And if they'd said from the beginning, OK, there's going to be a bit of temporary pain, but medium term, it's going to be better. Long term is going to be great. But we're going to put income tax up for the richest, and it's a temporary measure. I think no one would have left the country. Everyone would say, fair enough. But instead, they've tried to obfuscate and hide the truth that tax rises are coming. And it's getting worse and worse. Everybody's confused. Their popularity is plummeting.
Doesn't matter, does it? They have an enormous majority in the Commons, and they've got to fix a problem. That's how they see it. So they're wriggling, aren't they, at the moment? But there's no doubt. Would you suggest that we're probably all going to be faced with consequences come this budget that we don't like?
And there's no doubt that we're all going to be a little bit poorer off. And I think actually, as a politician, you can get away with that as long as you're really clear and you say it's temporary and the future is going to be much better. I think that they've got a big majority, but they're in big trouble. They're extraordinarily unpopular. I predict it's going to get worse and worse. And all of the new MPs with tiny majorities will be feeling the heat from their constituents are getting anxious. And I do predict Keir Starmer won't last the full 5 years. Again, tax should be really simple. And if you make it simple and you say it's temporary, people largely conform and are quite happy.
The issue here seems to be, more than anything else, it's not the policy, because, as you say, something's got to be done. We were told that before the election by the IMF, whichever party won, we were going to have to see tax rises and spending cuts. The problem seems to be transparency here.
Yes, this they can't lie straight in bed. They can't. What's really interesting is they try to say as little as possible, but they seem to say too much at the same time, and they're tying themselves in knots. The business community is confused. Consumer sentiment has plummeted, impacting house sales and retail sales, and it's a mess of their own making. And look, I don't want to be too partisan here. I was an independent politician, by the way, but this is shambolic. Everything that this government touches seems to go wrong. When it's about small stuff, it's not too much of an issue. When it's about your international standing and you balancing the books, this is really serious stuff. So for everyone's sake, I hope they get their act together. But we need clarity, and tax is complex, so they've got to make it as simple and as clear as possible.
Well, clarity, I guess, will come this week when we hear the budget. And as we've all agreed, that most people are going to feel miffed about it. But then you always do with budgets, don't you? Somebody's always offended. The problem was the definition of a working person, wasn't it? That's the problem.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's crazy. I think Piers Morgan's, was saying that is he a working person? As I said earlier, David Beckham, George Soros, the part-time cleaner. Where does this go? But they used that phrase, Anne, to try and say very little but reassure people. But it's created much more confusion, and it's almost a metaphor for how they've behaved since they were elected. There's confusion, no one knows where they stand, and everybody's fearing the worst. But you're right, look, there'll be tax rises, it'll be a bit painful. If they do it cleverly, we'll all move on, but they need to instill a sense of optimism. That's what we all want. We want to believe the future's going to be a bit better, and that's what's missing.
Is there an acknowledgement, do you think, that Keir Starmer's put both feet in his mouth with this when he said, it's people with assets aren't working people. People who can write a cheque to dig themselves out of a hole aren't working people. But yesterday we spoke to James Murray, Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury, who said anyone who goes out to work and gets paid for it is a working person. Now we've had Rachel Reeves say, well, even Keir Starmer's a working person. It sounds like they're doing some really serious rowing back.
Yes, I'm sorry for laughing, but it is preposterous, isn't it? And they're trying to put a lid on it, but every time they try and put a lid on the conversation, it gets worse and worse. I think the long and short of it is we've got to protect the very poorest. If you tax the very richest too much, they do a runner. So what I fear is that we end up with a squeezed middle, the hard-working people who save a little bit. They might have a buy-to-let property or a few shares, heaven forbid. If they're taxed to death, and they'll be very scared now, by the way, that's the worst outcome. Look, as Anne said, we're very close to the detail. I don't think it'll be as bad as they made out, and I think that actually we'll just move on and get on with it. But it's been a shambles in terms of communication.
OK. Andy Preston, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. It's ridiculous that we're talking about PR and communication, actually, because that should be the least important thing. In a way.
I think they've just dug themselves into a hole and they can't get out of it now. Because I feel, don't you, that maybe what they were trying to really say is the old-fashioned term working class.
Well, yes, in a way.
But you can't say that anymore.
Oh, I don't know.
So they say working people, but, there are lots of middle class and upper class, I suppose, people, if those terms still apply in any way, who still work for a living.
Of course they do. Of course they do. And, of course, what's interesting as well is this whole business of... it's where being in opposition catches up with you, is that Rachel Reeves said 18 months ago that freezing tax thresholds, which now she's going to extend beyond where the Tories had them, was a stealth tax on working people.
And now she's doing it.
Now she's doing it. So by their own definition, they're taxing working people. So it's all a mess. A bit of clarity would be nice. As I say, we'll get that on Wednesday. And we will get that clarity.
But I'll bet you we'll
it.
hear the terms working people a lot. Yeah. It'll be there, and we'll know what it will mean, and all the financial experts will be analysing it and tell us what it means for all of us. But it will be clothed in these funny, weird terms that Labour likes to use again, isn't it? Like working people.
Oh, I long for the old days where the Chancellor used to stand at the dispatch box with a glass of whiskey and a cigar.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. I think it was Dennis Healey used to do that with a glass of whiskey, I think, didn't he?
And Ken Clarke, I think he had a cigar.
Yeah.
But those days are long gone.
Absolutely. New days.
Right, on to the King and Queen. They have bid farewell to Samoa, the King telling leaders he hopes to survive long enough to see the country again.
Oh, this comes after King Charles delivered a landmark speech where he addressed the issue of reparation.
Oh, sort of.
Sort of.
Our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, is there.
When the King and Queen arrived at Sydney Airport at the start of their 10-day tour of Australia and Samoa, it was absolutely chucking it down with rain on the tarmac. And I'm afraid to say, as the King and Queen depart Samoa, it is pretty much the same weather, biblical rainfall. But the Samoans see this as a good thing. It's a good luck charm because it means potentially there will be a good harvest this year. And the King earlier on this morning was, alongside the Queen, was at a local village where he told the villagers he hopes to survive long enough to return to Samoa. He was also made a High Chief of the local district. And as you can see, they are boarding right now the Royal Australian Air Force jet, which will take them part way back to the United Kingdom. And it has been a grueling 10 days for their Majesties of many engagements, up to 10 engagements a day in some parts. And it has been an incredibly important trip for the King and Queen, but the King especially because it is a trip of first. The first time he has visited a realm outside the United Kingdom where he reigns as head of state, that's Australia, but also it's the first time he has addressed the 56 Commonwealth heads of government as the institution's head, and he would have been very determined to be here, and 6 months ago we didn't know if he would be here because of his cancer diagnosis, but clearly doctors have given him the green light, and on the whole it's been a pretty successful tour despite one or two small protests. He paused his cancer treatment while he was here in Australia and Samoa. As soon as he returns to London, that cancer treatment resumes.
Oh, well, it's nice to see them looking happy.
Yeah, they certainly have enjoyed it. You can tell that, can't you?
And
I think the Samoans have enjoyed having them. I'd love to see inside the jet.
Oh, you're just saying that, weren't you?
Well, you know, because obviously...
Will it be a posh one like that, or will it... It might not be.
They will have cleared out quite a lot of seats, maybe, in what they'd normally have as first class or business or something. And they would have put beds in there with a double bed. Yeah, they need to rest on a long thing like that, on a long journey like that.
Double bed?
Oh, I think so.
Oh,
what, do you think they have two singles?
Oh, no, I wasn't even thinking that. I just thought, how'd you get a double bed in a plane? You'd have to cut it in half.
No, you don't. If you look at the president, you know, Air Force One, they have all sorts of setups. Yeah, you'd need a double bed there so you can get a proper sleep as you fly.
Oh, there you go.
Well, he needs it particularly, doesn't he?
Well, he does at the moment.
Yeah, I
He's
think
being very well
too.
looked after. Just a quick one on the whole working people thing. Sean says, if Starmer, Reeves and Rayner are working people, when do I get my posh suits, specs, dresses, stays in New York and Ibiza disco tickets? Yeah, well, you know, I can understand why you're saying that, to be honest.
I think it's going to annoy an awful lot of people, that.
It's just, they've dug themselves into a hole.
They really have. They shouldn't have said it.
Stop digging.
Yeah.
Right, should we see what the weather's going to do? Because there's all this concern about another storm on the way. Oscar, I think.
I wish they'd stop naming them. It seems to have got worse since they named them.
It does, yeah. Anyway, Honour's got all the details.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We are expecting some rain around this weekend, particularly in the northwest, and it will turn windy for a time, but otherwise there's lots of dry, fine, settled weather around for this weekend. A cooler start, perhaps with some pockets of mist and fog, cloudy across parts of Sussex, Kent, East Anglia, for example. This cloud may bring some rain at times. Otherwise largely dry across much of England and Wales. A different story across western parts of Scotland, though, and Northern Ireland. Quite a wet afternoon on offer here with some heavier downpours and some fairly blustery winds in the northwest too. But across the south, temperatures just above average for the time of year, so feeling rather pleasant where you do catch the sunshine. As we head into This evening then, that rain is going to continue across parts of Scotland, generally clearing the far west, but still plenty of blustery showers behind that. And that rain could turn rather heavy at times too. Once again, clearing the far west of Northern Ireland, still some cloud around, but any rain generally clearing the far east. Otherwise, largely dry across much of England and Wales, still with that lingering cloud though across the southeast, which may just produce still a little bit of rain. But on the whole, it's generally turning drier as we head overnight. This frontal system, as it moves its way to the southeast, generally a weakening feature, so by the time it reaches the south, staying largely dry. And that brings plenty of clear spells overnight too. And that also means it's going to be feeling a little bit cooler than it has done over recent nights. May even just see the odd spot of frost around northern parts too. Otherwise, for Sunday, we've got high pressure building, plenty of dry, bright weather, plenty of autumnal sunshine too. We are going to see a change from the northwest though as this next weather front slowly pushes its way in. So some quite heavy downpours of rain by the time we reach the afternoon across Northern Ireland and across western parts of Scotland. And once again, those blustery winds continuing too. Temperatures a touch down compared to today, otherwise still feeling pleasant in the sunshine.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Right, still to come for you. The clocks go back in the morning, 2 a.m. tomorrow morning. So that would mean you'll get an extra hour in bed. But is that good or bad for our circadian rhythms? We'll talk about that next.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Budget Day on GB News on Wednesday. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is...
who's going to pay it? Budget Day, all day Wednesday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, you lucky things. us lucky things too. You can expect an extra treat tonight. 1 glorious hour of extra sleep.
Yes, the clocks go back an hour at 2 o'clock tomorrow morning, which is always, if you're awake, it's always fascinating to see these clocks that change automatically.
Absolutely. But I've only just realised from something you said earlier, if you work on a shift that goes over 2 o'clock, then you end up working an extra hour.
You do. I used to do that.
That's horrible.
It was really horrible. I used to hate it.
Yeah.
Absolutely hate it. But it's gone the other way now. So now it's an extra hour in bed, which is lovely.
Yeah. And while it does, of course, mean that winter is coming, alongside that extra hour of sleep, it will mean brighter mornings ahead.
Yeah, but darker evenings.
Yeah.
We're joined by sleep expert Lindsay Browning. Morning to you, Lindsay. Does this take us... I mean, we talk about this twice a year. Does it really affect how we sleep, or do we get over it after 24 hours?
A majority of people, you won't really notice a difference because it's like a 1 hour time zone change. So if you're traveling to France, you'll not really worry about that difference. But it's really for people who struggle with their sleep anyway that this 1 hour difference can really start to affect them. Because if they're already struggling to fall asleep or stay asleep, then changing that bedtime by an hour can lead to anxiety, frustration if they're not really able to fall asleep because they're not producing melatonin, our sleep hormone that we produce at the right time.
Is it
so for
true?
those people, it can be a bit more tricky.
Yeah, is it true that the most important thing with sleep is to sort of have a regular routine? And of course, those of us like we do, work the odd shift at different times of the week or something like that. It's very, very difficult for our circadian rhythms. And I don't even know what I mean when I say that. What is a circadian rhythm and why is it so important to our health?
So our body, we have our own internal clock called our circadian rhythm, and it regulates all sorts of things, not just sleep, but it regulates when we feel hungry, when we produce certain types of hormones, when we feel really at our most alert. And that is irrespective of what the time actually is. Our body self has its own clock. So if you change your time zone radically, your body is still in the original time zone. Now, when the clocks change, tonight, tomorrow morning, we have a 1 hour time shift. It's like a 1 hour time zone change, which means that our body tomorrow will still think we're on the same time as we were today, meaning that tomorrow we might find ourselves feeling much more tired earlier than our normal bedtime. But of course, then it's only 1 hour and we can adapt to a 1 hour time change. It'll take us a day, 2 days at the most, really, to be able to adapt to such things. So we shouldn't worry too much about it and make the most of that extra hour sleep, which is going to be really valuable, especially if we haven't been getting enough sleep up until now.
I saw a report yesterday saying that within 48 hours of a time change like this, there are more people have car accidents, more people have heart attacks and strokes. I mean, actually really serious stuff. We sort of laugh and joke about the clocks going forward and back, but for some people it really is serious.
Yeah, because if we, especially in the spring change, that's when we lose that hour, there is an increased risk of car accidents because often people just aren't getting that extra hour's sleep. But yes, our timing change, even if we go to bed tomorrow at the right time, that the world says is the right time, our body doesn't realise that's actually the time we should be going to sleep. So our hormones are just out of balance and we won't be producing melatonin at the right time. We might find it that we're waking up at the wrong time the next morning. And that can result in a lack of sleep, which then if we don't get enough sleep, we're at a higher risk of heart attacks, road traffic accidents, that kind of thing. Yeah. And as well, it's the fact that we're going to lose that hour's light in the evening, and that's going to have a big impact to our mental health and our circadian rhythm as well.
And it's getting stressed about it as well. I mean, it's certainly people who work in breakfast television, as I'm sure lots of shift workers in various jobs, you get so stressed if you feel you haven't had enough sleep. Anyway, we'll leave it there at the moment. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. And I hope everybody enjoys their extra hour in bed, if that's indeed what you get.
Yeah, it is. I tell you what, shift workers are the unsung heroes of this country because it's hellish.
It is. And you get so stressy, don't you, when you realise you haven't had enough sleep. Or if you wake up too early and then you can't get back to sleep, you get very stressed out about that too.
Anyway, look, now at GB News, we love to hear what you think. You know that. Every day, we're running our poll. Today, we're asking, can Keir Starmer's government really smash the gangs? Of course, there was news yesterday from our very own Mark White that the number of migrants who've crossed illegally into the UK on small boats yesterday surpassed. Now we've passed what we had the entirety of last year. So there really is pressure on the government. So can they smash the gangs?
Well, we'll be bringing you the live results throughout the day, so make sure you stay tuned. The final result will be announced later in Nana Akwe's show. For all our latest polls and news about polls and how to vote in the polls, just go to gbnews.com/poll.
Yes. Now, once you're busy having your say, then you can ponder whether you'd like to win Christmas this year. Well, we're giving you the chance to do just that with the latest Great British Giveaway.
Yes, you could win £20,025 in tax-free cash. You see, there's a Christmassy thing going on there, isn't there? A further £5,000 cash to spend on all of your prezzies, and then there's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. So Christmas lunch would be on us too. Oh. If you fancy having Christmas on us, here's all the details you need.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Osama bin Laden issued a fatwa entitled World Front for Combat Against Jews and Crusaders, and President George W. Bush talked of a crusade on terrorism. In 2010, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula sent a parcel bomb to New York. It was addressed to Reginald of Chatillon. The addressee had died at the hands of Saladin in 1187. Those facts suggest that the long history of struggle between Christendom and Islamic caliphates remains relevant, at least to some militant Islamists. That being the case, perhaps we should all understand the past. General Sir Simon Mayle, a former Deputy Chief of the Defence Staff Operations, can be our teacher, particularly if we want to know in gory detail about battles to control Jerusalem, Constantinople, Vienna and the Eastern Mediterranean. His new book is called The House of War. It's an excellent read, which perhaps ought to figure in a national adult curriculum. And he joins me. Well, let's begin with the word crusade. What was it that drove Christians around Europe to want to cross to the Holy Land and seize Jerusalem?
Context and timing is really important to understand. It's been rather stereotyped as Christian aggression against peace-loving Muslims. The Islamic religion had burst out of the desert in the 7th century with the death of the Prophet Muhammad. And for the next nearly 400 years, had Christianity, Christendom, the Christian states absolutely on the back foot. It took the Holy Land, destroyed the Persian Empire, took the North Africa, which was Christian at the time, including Egypt, of course, took Spain all the way into Tours, Charles Martel. 100 years after the death of the Prophet, it expanded in an extraordinary state.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Time for the sport at 6:40 with Aidan. Morning to you.
Good morning to you both. Good to be back.
We better have a look at Leicester City and Nottingham Forest last night.
Yeah, big East Midlands derby. Yesterday we know, of course, that Leicester, their manager Steve Cooper, was formerly at Nottingham Forest fairly recently, did very well with them. But Nottingham Forest went there last night and recorded quite a comprehensive 3-1 victory. It lifts them up to 5th in the table. And it's interesting because they've got this veteran striker called Chris Wood. He's not one of the most heralded names in the Premier League. He's from New Zealand. He made his debut playing for West Brom, I think it was. In fact, I think I was there back in 2009. So he's been around a while, but he scored 17 goals since the new manager at Nottingham Forest, Nuno Espirito Santo, took over in December. Only Erling Haaland has scored more goals from open play than than the 17 recorded by Chris Wood. So that's someone really proving their value at this level of the league. In terms of the other fixtures today, not exactly standout ones. Manchester City are in action against Southampton at 3 o'clock. Aston Villa, who performed more miracles this week in the Champions League, they're in action at 3 o'clock against Bournemouth. And Arsenal, we're going to touch on them later on when we do a more fuller...
Aston Villa v Bournemouth will be quite interesting, won't it? Because Bournemouth are doing ever so well.
They do. They beat Arsenal. They just dispatched Arsenal last week. That just showed last week. It doesn't matter how good you are. You lose a player in normal time in the sending off.
You're vulnerable.
You are massively vulnerable these days because they can just... There are so many sophisticated ways you can play around the extra team. It used to be said that if you've got 10 men, it's harder to play against because they bank up and just make it difficult to play. For your opponents, but nowadays the opponent seems to be a bit more flexible when they've got the extra man. But Arsenal in action tomorrow, huge injury crisis for them, and I fear that if they fall 7 points behind tomorrow with a defeat at Liverpool, that's a hell of an ask.
What's their massive injury crisis?
Well, they've got Martin Odegaard is out. He's been out for quite a while now, about a month. And the thing is, you never get the truth from clubs anymore about this scale of the injury problems, and because it's not in their interests.
No, they don't want to say so.
They don't want to say. Well, they can't skirt around the fact that a player's injured. But I've had it so many times down the years when I was in press conference. How long's he out for? Oh, well, we think maybe a week or 2 weeks. No, they know full well he's not going to be back for 3 months. But they don't want to give that competitive advantage to their opponents. And so it's difficult to know. I mean, I didn't think Odegaard would be out. He got injured on international duty playing for Norway a couple of windows ago. I mean, he's still not back. And so we've got other players as well. Go on, what are you saying?
A couple of windows ago. Can we talk about the Lionesses?
Yeah, I'm disappointed, actually. I'm a bit worried about them because they hadn't conceded 4 goals at home since way back in 2007 when the women's game looked so much different to now. So it almost looked like a throwback into an era they'd rather forget, actually, because that's when they were really struggling to push the game onto the national forefront or the national stage. And last night, 3 goals down in the first half against the old enemy, Germany, who they beat in the Euro 2022 final. 54,000 fans there as well. That sounds good, and I still think it is good, but they were hoping to sell out the stadium, which is 90,000. So some within the game will be a little bit disappointed that on a Friday night when there was no other major football within London, that they didn't manage to fill the place out or at least put another 10,000 on the gate. Also, worryingly, 7 players from the side that won the Euros 2 years ago played last night. And so to be quite comprehensively beaten by Germany will be disappointment. This will be a disappointment to them. But in 8 months' time, they travelled to Switzerland for the Euros. Plenty of time to get your act together, don't get me wrong. But that's not good when you're losing at home to one of your rivals like that. And as I say, it was 4-3. England did salvage some pride in the second half. But it's very rare to go 3-0 down in the first half. I hope they can pull it around, I really do.
Let's hope so. Right, Aidan, we're leaving it there, but you're going to be back later on to tell us about... Can't get rid of me that easily. No, talk about Harry Redknapp.
Absolutely.
And Jamie. He's
written
got
a book
together with Jamie.
Sounds good.
It is fun.
Sounds good, yeah.
Compare those two. Right, we're going to go through the papers for you in a couple of minutes. Kevin Schofield and Claire Muldoon. It's a Scotland special. That's next.
Yes.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30am.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
True crime is everywhere.
Yeah, next weekend, CrimeCon UK takes place in London. And joining us now to tell us more about that event and the true crime phenomena is former detective Stephen... how do you pronounce your surname? Keogh. Sorry, Stephen.
That's all right.
I should have checked you before.
No worries.
And Nancy, and again, Nancy, what's your surname?
Bourne.
Bourne, thank you. I'm showing my ignorance there, but thank you both for joining us. So, Stephen, you're a former top cop. Hope you don't mind me describing you as that. At CrimeCon and other events like that, do you get into sort of the semantics of the investigations and, how... For example, how I was watching something the other night where somebody was unfortunately murdered, but you saw the crime scene investigators trying to work out from which side the person was attacked from. Did the knife come from the left-hand side or the right-hand side? Is it all that kind of stuff?
So for me, everything I've done since I've left the police is about sharing that knowledge of investigations, because if you watch TV, they get it wrong a lot. So what we try and do, I'm not the only police officer there, there's experts, so forensic scientists, psychologists, all from that investigative world, just trying to get across, well, actually, this is how it's really done. This is what we do, not what you're going to see on telly. And I think that's really important. So for me personally, coming along to CrimeCon, I just look at the list of people that are there, honestly, and I'm proud. I'm proud to be associated with them. There are some fascinating people there. People who've really fought for justice for their children. People who are campaigning for victims, for survivors. So it's an event that when you look at the name, you might think, oh, they're just going to sit there talking about serial killers and what they got up to. Couldn't be further from the truth. It's really about what goes on, how it impacts the victims, how the investigations are carried out. It's educational as much as anything.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
6:47. Let's see what's in the papers this morning with the political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield, and the journalist Claire Muldoon. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Right, let's talk about the... In the Telegraph, Kevin, let's talk about the...
budget.
The budget.
Yeah, so Wednesday is the big day, obviously. And the government have managed to get themselves into a real mess over the definition of working people. We feel like we've been talking about this now for days and days and days. What is a working person? But this is because Labour put it in their manifesto. They wouldn't put up taxes on working people, but they can't define what a working person is, because basically, one way or another, I think all of us are going to pay more tax.
Well, if historically we have difficulties, you know, giving what the documentation or the evidence of any words are, they can't really define anything, can they, as a party?
No, that's true. So anyway, Rachel Reeves said now that she could only commit to not raising key taxes on workers. So that's another new phrase.
That's another word.
So by that, she's talking about income tax, national insurance or VAT, but obviously there are lots and lots of other taxes which
to be fair to them, they are the only three they promised they would not put up before the election.
They did, but I think it's the fact that they said they won't put up taxes on working people. So lots of working people will have, you know, shares or may well be landlords, or, you know, they're still working, aren't they? So if their taxes are going up, then surely that is a working person's tax rate going up. So they've tried in many, many different ways to try and redefine or define in the first place what a working person is, but then they roll back on it and they just made a new mess.
Absolutely failed miserably. I mean, from the start of this government's administration, they have not kept up their word on anything. They've just taken away, not delivered, and now they're threatening all of this. I mean, people are incandescent with rage. They don't know what's going to happen on this budget. And where's the opposition for this budget, incidentally? I mean, they're going through a change of governance at the Conservative Party as well. But Rishi Sunak, still the head of the party, he'll have to do the response to Reeves at the budget box.
And then he's gone 3 days later.
And then he's gone 3 days later.
Which makes it meaningless.
I mean, absolutely. And throw into the mix what's happening across the pond. But, you know, the key thing here I think we have to remember is that although the Labour Party will say, we are not going after the working person or the working people, if they put the 2% increase on pay-as-you-earn, PAYE income tax, that is going to directly affect working people. It really is, because these SMEs are not going to be able to afford it. That then will put prices up for the services and products that they might be selling and giving. It's just redefining the debt, redefining the names of things, and just pushing money around.
Meanwhile, though, Claire, according to The Guardian, more than 1 million people in Britain, 1 million households. Will be better off after the budget.
Well, these are households living in abject poverty. And do you know that the statistic from the Trussell Group and the Joseph Rowntree Foundation is that 1 in 3 children in this country are living in poverty? The definition of poverty might change, right? But even just that word, the definition of poverty, regardless of how they are defining it in an academic process, for me, that's a child that is going without basic needs. And we are not in Victorian Britain. We are 2024, and this is still happening. I think that is an abomination. Where is... I mean, we've got food banks in this country, for heaven's sake. People have to rely getting their food from food banks. That is disgusting. It really is.
If you look at it from a political point of view, will that offset all the criticism over, for instance, cutting the winter fuel payments and things like that?
No, it won't.
If the government are able to say, very poor families will be at least £420 a year better off, surely that would politically sort of stave off too much criticism.
Certainly
elsewhere?
among Labour supporters, you know, the Labour Party is designed to improve the lot of poorer people. That's what it's supposed to do.
Yes.
So yeah, that will go down well with the party's base.
Look,
however, I don't think it's going to...
It's only going to be £60 a month for a family. It's not very much at all.
But I don't think it's going to overshadow really the winter.
And most of those benefits, what they're going to do, the way they're going to do that again is by redefining the debt, because they're going to allow. They won't allow water companies or your council tax or anything else you might be in arrears with to take a bigger proportion from your benefit. That's the key. They're not giving away more money. They're going to make the repayment of debt easier for the families.
Right. Let's move on to something that isn't the budget, should we?
Can we? That'd be great.
Let's. I'm looking at the list. Is there anything that isn't actually in the budget? What's the Express saying? Well, about the fuel payments.
Winter fuel payment. Yes, I mean, again...
It's not actually budget, is it? But it's still hellish.
Yeah. So we know that this was something that was announced very soon after Labour came into power, that they're means testing the winter fuel payments. However, Mel Stride, who may well be Shadow Chancellor, depending on who becomes the next Conservative leader, we're keeping an eye on that one. He has written to Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, to say, please make sure that the people who are at least entitled to it, who receive pension credit, they're still supposed to get winter fuel payment, make sure that they actually receive it, because in many cases people who are entitled to pension credit don't actually get it, and therefore don't get winter fuel payment. So at the very least, he says, those who are still entitled to winter fuel payment, please guarantee.
So that's not actually a means test. What they've done is removed the universal benefit of the winter fuel allowance.
Yeah, and only those on the very, very low.
Which they will know. They'll have
income.
that data. They will have that data, so they will know.
Well, except they are putting adverts in a lot of the papers, aren't they, saying make sure you're claiming what you need to claim.
What they're trying to do is make sure they claim pension credit if you are entitled to it.
There has been an increase. There definitely has been an increase in people claiming. It was something like 850,000.
Yeah, but apparently the document you have to sort of fill in is about 13 pages long.
And also, there's a delay, sometimes up to 10 weeks, between applying and actually being approved, you know, and that is...
You're well into winter by then.
Absolutely, you know.
Again, that's the fault of systems doing things online and not actually being able to speak and articulate to someone. Remember when we had banks on the high road? Yeah. Remember when we could go in and chat to the bank manager? Yeah.
Those were the days.
Yeah, well, they were the days, but they've gone, and they won't be.
And they're not coming.
Well, Janby says, don't forget, clocks go back tonight. I'm putting mine back to 1979. Hello, Mrs. Thatcher.
Right, you two, see you later. Here's the weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We are expecting some rain around this weekend, particularly in the northwest, and it will turn windy for a time, but otherwise there's lots of dry, fine, settled weather around for this weekend. A cooler start, perhaps with some pockets of mist and fog, cloudy across parts of Sussex, Kent, East Anglia, for example. This cloud may bring some rain at times. Otherwise largely dry across much of England and Wales. A different story across western parts of Scotland, though, and Northern Ireland. Quite a wet afternoon on offer here with some heavier downpours and some fairly blustery winds in the northwest too. But across the south, temperatures just above average for the time of year, so feeling rather pleasant where you do catch the sunshine. As we head into This evening then, that rain is going to continue across parts of Scotland, generally clearing the far west, but still plenty of blustery showers behind that. And that rain could turn rather heavy at times too. Once again, clearing the far west of Northern Ireland, still some cloud around, but any rain generally clearing the far east. Otherwise, largely dry across much of England and Wales, still with that lingering cloud though across the southeast, which may just produce still a little bit of rain. But on the whole, it's generally turning drier as we head overnight. This frontal system, as it moves its way to the southeast, generally a weakening feature, so by the time it reaches the south, staying largely dry. And that brings plenty of clear spells overnight too. And that also means it's going to be feeling a little bit cooler than it has done over recent nights. May even just see the odd spot of frost around northern parts too. Otherwise, for Sunday, we've got high pressure building, plenty of dry, bright weather, plenty of autumnal sunshine too. We are going to see a change from the northwest though as this next weather front slowly pushes its way in. So some quite heavy downpours of rain by the time we reach the afternoon across Northern Ireland and across western parts of Scotland. And once again, those blustery winds continuing too. Temperatures a touch down compared to today, otherwise still feeling pleasant in the sunshine.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
On demand. I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. The world holds its breath as Israel launches an attack on Iran.
The Israeli government fire a barrage of missiles on military targets across Iran in the latest escalation of the conflict, and fears there are now that Tehran could retaliate.
Well, Number 10 says it's monitoring the situation closely, claiming further escalation is in no one's interest.
This comes as closer to home, Chancellor Rachel Reeves insists that Sir Keir Starmer is a working person, meaning he could be shielded from tax rises in the autumn budget.
Yes, the row about what is or is not a working person goes on, but I think what we can be sure of is that for millions and millions of us, our taxes are going to be going up next week.
King Charles says he hopes he survives long enough to see Samoa again as he bids farewell to the Pacific Islands.
And this comes as the reparation row intensifies, with rumours that the Prime Minister could offer non-cash options to Commonwealth nations.
And a treat for you tonight, as long as you're in bed and not working. The clocks go back at 2 o'clock, so you should get an extra hour in bed.
we could all do with that. Now, Arsenal's title credentials have been thrown into doubt before the clocks go back. They face an injury crisis ahead of tomorrow's crucial trip to Liverpool at Anfield. England's cricketers, meanwhile, are in deep trouble against Pakistan in Rawalpindi.
Hello, good morning. Lots of fine weather around this weekend, but not for all. If you want to know where the wet and windy weather's going to be, then stay tuned for all the details.
Just gone 7 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is GB News Breakfast.
I've got some shocking news for you this morning. For the people of Wales, the good people of Wales, it's Britain's ugliest place.
Oh, yes, I heard this. This is terrible.
Says Professor Daniel Hammermesh, who's an expert on pulchronomics, the financial impact of attractiveness, is at a university in Texas.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But anyway, apparently, less attractive people migrate to places like Wales when they want to settle down. Better-looking people go to London.
That's stupid.
And nonsense.
Isn't it?
I think it's absolute nonsense.
The reason people go and live in Wales because they want a nice bit of peace and quiet, if they
Yeah.
can afford a place in the countryside or something like that.
He also says more attractive people earn £150,000 more in a lifetime than their ugly friends.
Now, you see, that may have a point, in that you do better in life the better looking you are. I don't know, but that could be an argument, couldn't it?
Well, maybe in today's world where everything's Instagram.
Yes, exactly.
But the idea that Wales is Britain's ugliest place, I think, is downright offensive.
It is, indeed.
Says someone in Texas.
Yeah.
What does he know?
Well, yeah,
He's never
exactly.
been to
And
Wales.
what about people in Texas too?
Yes.
They just hide their looks under a big hat.
Oh, yes, I was going to say there's a term for people in Texas, isn't there? But I won't say
There
it.
is. No, don't say it.
No, better I don't. But anyways, there you go. So if you're in Wales this morning, we apologise that you're being branded in this way.
And we know it's not true.
I know some gorgeous people in Wales because I've got family in Wales.
Oh, there you go.
So they're all
Yeah,
fabulous.
but what's weird is that he's actually saying that the uglier you are, the more likely you are to move to Wales.
Yeah.
I mean, that just doesn't make any sense at all.
None at all. Absolute nonsense.
So.
Anyway, let's start with breaking news, should we? That's happened overnight. Israel has launched a barrage of missile strikes across Iran in the latest escalation in the Middle East conflict.
And this comes as Tehran has reportedly threatened its citizens with lengthy prison sentences for sharing footage of the strikes.
Well, meanwhile, Number 10 said further escalation is in nobody's interest.
Former British Army spokesperson Major Mike Shearer joined us earlier.
Question that the Israelis are on the front foot here. And the only reason this problem in the Middle East has persisted for the decades that it has is because just as Israel get close to completing and finishing the problem, they're always stopped by the United States. So I would say that Israel are absolutely on the front foot and they should go on. I know that they've said that their strikes for the time being is done, but I suspect there's a bit more to come yet.
Where does this leave us here in the UK, Mike, in terms of heightened tensions here, possibility of, especially if we get in, or as we are to an extent anyway, but more involved in this situation, does this put us on a heightened footing here?
Yeah, I suspect it probably, the truth is it probably does. But I'm afraid that is our own internal security issues. Let's not forget, despite the general tone of the international community, it would appear that Israel and the IDF are the perpetrators here. Let's not forget who started this. Let's not forget the 7th of October, and then immediately on the 8th when Hezbollah joined in. I have researched and researched. Look, I've been dealing with the law of armed conflict within customary international law fairly much all my life, because nobody wants to get that wrong when you're holding a weapon. And I can assure you that Israel has not broken any customary international laws, and indeed the serious part of that with regarding this conflict is the law of armed conflict. They're perfectly within their right to be doing what they're doing, and they are responding. They are not the aggressor.
So what happens next? Do we wait for other countries, I mean ourselves, America, to make some sort of a response, or are we just sitting back and waiting to see what happens next?
Well, I know that there, if my memory serves me right, I think there are peace talks planned for this weekend in Qatar. And I suspect people will be worrying whether this now puts that on ice. I suspect not. Look, peace could occur tomorrow if Hezbollah and Hamas put their weapons down, Hamas release the hostages, and they present themselves and say, we're done. Of course, that is not likely to happen. But there is the peace formula right there. It's not complicated. Again, the noise from the international community is that Israel is endangering civilian life. No, they're not. It is Hamas and Hezbollah that are endangering civilian life. The ugly term of collateral damage, it is a thing, and it is permitted within the law of armed conflict to have civilian casualties if it fits within the stated military objective and military advantage. And everything that I've seen so far says that it is.
Right, closer to home, and the Chancellor has insisted that Sir Keir Starmer is a working person, so therefore would be protected from the government's controversial tax hikes in the budget on Wednesday.
Well, when you think of it, if asked, she'd have to say that, wouldn't she? She can't say he's not a working person. He's the Prime Minister.
Well, this is the problem.
Well, yeah, absolutely. That's why Number 10 has faced such backlash over its definition of a working person. I mean, the idea was, and Keir Starmer said it, that those with assets, property and savings could be not working people and therefore hit with tax rises.
Yeah, let's talk to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. What about the old adage, Catherine, that when you're in a hole, stop digging?
Yes, absolutely.
I feel like we're just going round in sort of ever-decreasing circles with this, what is a working person? But it is clear, although the government said in the manifesto, no new taxes on working people, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is clarifying that, saying basically what they're talking about is the main taxes paid by working people: income tax, national insurance, VAT. No rise in the headline rate. But of course, as we all know, there's plenty of people whose main income is a job who also have income from shares. So there might be capital gains, there are inheritance tax, fuel duty. Now, all of those are potentially going to rise because we know there's this big black hole they're going to fill. We know it's going to be difficult. We don't know all the ins and outs, but it sounds also like, although they're not raising national insurance on employees' contributions, they are going to raise it on employers. That sounds like it's going to be the biggest revenue raiser, and it could raise like £15 billion a year. They're going to earmark that for the NHS. Now, they can say that's not a tax on working people, it's on employers. But of course, businesses have costs. If you put up the cost for business, where does that filter through? That might filter through on less in the way of wages or paying less into people's pensions, and so on and so on. So it is going to be painful. We just don't know at this point how painful, but we're not going to have very long till we find out. Because, of course,
no. I mean, I was thinking today, I don't know when they actually announced the date of the budget, but has it been cynically brought into the same sort of week as the Tory leadership election and even the American election to sort of, I mean, to bury a news story, in other words? If it's really bad news, there are going to be even bigger headlines coming from elsewhere.
Well, I suspect that the Tory leadership election is pretty much going to be buried rather than the budget, because the budget is going to affect all of
everybody.
Us. Let's face it, it's going to affect all of us. I suspect the Tory leadership election, we will find out the result of that at last after, about 4 months, this time next week, next Saturday. But then, of course, come the following week, November the 5th, as you say, the huge news in the United States with the American election, assuming, of course, that we get a clear answer there, because it's looking so tight that it may be that we don't even have an immediate answer. And then whatever happens in America, that's going to have huge, huge repercussions. So I think the budget, yes, America will come along and overshadow it, but I think the Tory leadership
won't.
Election, although many, many people care very passionately about it, I think quite a lot of the public are really done with the Conservatives, and at the moment, couldn't care that much.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Catherine, thanks very much indeed.
Amazing, isn't it? But it is going to be a very newsy 10 days, isn't it? You're going to be up all night.
Yes, for the US election. Yeah, me and Ellie from midnight, I think.
I'll be thinking of you.
Midnight to 6. I'll be bringing you up, Anne.
I'll be lying in bed thinking of you.
Oh, thanks very much indeed. Now, the King and Queen have bid farewell to Samoa. The King telling leaders, which sounds a bit grim, he hopes to survive long enough to see the country again.
I hope he didn't say that in a sad way. This comes, of course, after he delivered a landmark speech where he addressed the issue of reparation.
Well, our royal correspondent Cameron Walker has the latest.
When the King and Queen arrived at Sydney Airport at the start of their 10-day tour of Australia and Samoa, it was absolutely chucking it down with rain on the tarmac. And I'm afraid to say, as the King and Queen depart Samoa, it is pretty much the same weather, biblical rainfall. But the Samoans see this as a good thing. It's a good luck charm because it means potentially there will be a good harvest this year. And the King earlier on this morning was, alongside the Queen, was at a local village where he told the villagers he hopes to survive long enough to return to Samoa. He was also made a High Chief of the local district. And as you can see, they are boarding right now the Royal Australian Air Force jet, which will take them part way back to the United Kingdom. And it has been a grueling 10 days for their Majesties, of many engagements, up to 10 engagements a day in some parts. And it has been an incredibly important trip for the King and Queen, but the King especially, because it is a trip of firsts. The first time he has visited a realm outside the United Kingdom where he reigns as head of state, that's Australia, but also it's the first time he has addressed the 56 Commonwealth heads of government as the institution's head, and he would have been very determined to be here. And 6 months ago we didn't know if he would be here because of his cancer diagnosis, but clearly doctors have given him the green light, and on the whole it's been a pretty successful tour despite 1 or 2 small protests. He paused his cancer treatment while he was here in Australia and Samoa. As soon as he returns to London, that cancer treatment resumes.
That's a nice little wave.
Yes, and all in all, I think most of us looked at the pictures and thought, he looks well. He does look well.
I think so.
And he certainly looked as though he was enjoying himself.
Yeah, which is good. But I hope he gets to return.
Yes, that was a rather sad thing to say.
Unless he did it with a sort of wink and a smile.
Well,
you do when you get to a certain age.
Yes.
You don't know if you're going to go back.
And actually, it's one hell of a journey, even if you are the King and Queen and probably travelling in extreme comfort. It's still an awful big journey for them, and they are in their late 70s.
Yes. Right. The weather there, as you can see, raining. Well, at least it's warm rain.
Yes, exactly.
We're not that lucky
Ours
over
isn't.
here. Let's get an update from Honor.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We are expecting some rain around this weekend, particularly in the northwest, and it will turn windy for a time, but otherwise there's lots of dry, fine, settled weather around for this weekend. A cooler start, perhaps with some pockets of mist and fog, cloudy across parts of Sussex, Kent, East Anglia, for example. This cloud may bring some rain at times. Otherwise largely dry across much of England and Wales. A different story across western parts of Scotland, though, and Northern Ireland. Quite a wet afternoon afternoon on offer here with some heavier downpours and some fairly blustery winds in the northwest too. But across the south, temperatures just above average for the time of year, so feeling rather pleasant where you do catch the sunshine. As we head into this evening then, that rain is going to continue across parts of Scotland, generally clearing the far west, but still plenty of blustery showers behind that. And that rain could turn rather heavy at times too. Once again, clearing the far west of Northern Ireland, still some cloud around, but any rain generally clearing the far east. Otherwise, largely dry across much of England and Wales, still with that lingering cloud though across the southeast, which may just produce still a little bit of rain. But on the whole, it's generally turning drier as we head overnight. This frontal system, as it moves its way to the southeast, generally a weakening feature, so by the time it reaches the south, staying largely dry. And that brings plenty of clear spells overnight too. And that also means it's going to be feeling a little bit cooler than it has done over recent nights. May even just see the odd spot of frost around northern parts too. Otherwise, for Sunday, we've got high pressure building, plenty of dry, bright weather, plenty of autumnal sunshine too. We are going to see a change from the northwest though, as this next weather front slowly pushes its way in. So some quite heavy downpours of rain by the time we reach the afternoon across Northern Ireland and across western parts of Scotland. And once again, those blustery winds continuing too. Temperatures a touch down compared to today, otherwise still feeling pleasant in the sunshine.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
How many sleeps until Christmas?
Oh, I don't know. Have you worked it out?
No, I haven't worked it out yet, no, but I know it's...
It's a very important thought.
It is. We're heading to that stage.
But you're not allowed to talk Christmas, really, until Halloween's over, really.
I know
One thing at a time.
I know someone who's put their tree up already.
I'm very
You like it up early?
I'm tempted, yeah. But it takes such a lot of putting up and then getting down again. So in the end, you think, well, use it for as long as you can. Brighten up the living room. Why
Fair
not?
point. Fair
You've
point.
got your tree up already. We want to see a picture, please.
Oh, yes, please, yeah. But how would you like to take some of the stress out of Christmas? Because you could win the whole thing with us. We're giving you the chance in the latest Great British Giveaway.
You could win £20,025. It's a Christmassy thing around 25. Do you get it? In tax-free cash, and then a further £5,000 cash to spend on all of your presents, and then another £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. So, if you like, Christmas lunch is on us too. If you fancy having Christmas on us, here's all the details you need.
We could be delivering the perfect Christmas to you this year. First, we'll give you £20,025 in tax-free cash. Then we'll give you...
Lovely that, wouldn't it? To have a really nice Christmas and not have to worry about a
To
penny
think I
of
didn't
it.
pay a penny for it, yeah, that would be lovely.
Nice. Right, still to come for you. Should celebs stay out of politics? Or do they have a right to have their say? We'll debate that next.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Serving some of the most talked about food in Chelsea, executive head chef of Number 50 Cheney, Ian Smith, has created a range of menus with a hint of the homeland, using the finest British ingredients sourced by trusted suppliers. Ian Smith was head chef at Jason Atherton's Social Eating House and spent time in the kitchens of the Galvin brothers. Ian joins me now to tell more of the story. Tell me about Number 50 Cheney.
Yes, so we are a beautiful restaurant down in a corner of Chelsea on the embankment with an amazing team. And we are really pride ourselves on, being an affordable luxury that people, really are wanting to return to week in, week out.
What's the view from your restaurant?
We can see the embankment, the Thames, and Albert Bridge, which is very nice.
Very
it's
nice.
actually lit up. Very romantic.
And tell me a little bit about your philosophy. I was talking there about having a touch of the homeland, British food, seasonal food.
Yes. Yeah, I think for me, great cooking is, with simplicity on finest ingredients, cooked with simplicity, and ultimately, there to be enjoyed through... Yeah, sorry.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to say, it starts as a young person's business. You went into it very young, didn't you? 15?
Yes. Yeah, so I was 15. I sat in my parents' bedroom, called the Ritz, the Dorchester and Claridge's, and very luckily, a man on the end of the phone, 21 years ago, sent me on to a college course called the Specialised Chef Scholarship. 3 days later, I had a Ritz stamp letter through the post, and off me and my parents went, and luckily I got on the course.
And how old were you when you got your first responsibility, would you say?
I think the biggest responsibility in my career is today. Leading number 50 Cheney.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Budget Day on GB News on Wednesday. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is...
who's going to pay it? Budget Day all day Wednesday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, it's not uncommon for politicians to use celebrity endorsers for campaign trails, I suppose, is in a way to draw in more voters for them.
You see it a lot in the States, don't
Certainly
you?
in the States.
They've been more star-studded than ever. Kamala Harris sharing the stage with Beyoncé and Bruce Springsteen and all people like that. Trump, of course, has had his fair share of it. Billionaire Elon Musk backing him.
But should celebrities really get involved in politics? And does their opinion really matter to us, the voters?
Well, let's talk to former leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton, and the commentator, Paula London. Good to see you both this morning. Neil, I mean, is politics... If celebrities get involved in politics, if I can put my teeth in, it sways people in a different way, doesn't it? And I wonder if it is healthy.
Well, celebs, of course, have votes and they're entitled to take part in the political process like you and me. But why anybody should pay the slightest attention to what they say is a mystery. After all, you wouldn't employ them to fix your car or even manage your investments. So why would you be guided by whatever they say in deciding who's best to run the country? But I'm always amused, actually, by these multimillionaire champagne socialists who wear their social consciences on their sleeves and I suppose try to assuage the hypocrisy of their lifestyles, which are at variance with the lives of those whose interests they seek to advance at the lower end of the income stage, whilst living a completely different life. Some of these people, Hollywood limousine liberals, who live in houses costing $50, $100 million in Beverly Hills and so on. What on earth have they got in common with your ordinary Californian? And I dare say that they take good care to ensure they minimize the tax burden in basket case California. And so it's all ultimately hypocrisy, and I think it's quite amusing to watch them.
Paula, what do you think? I mean, some of these celebrities have gazillions of followers, and I guess what they say will have an influence, won't it?
Well, yes. Taylor Swift, for example, she has about 70 million followers, I believe, on Instagram, and there's about 350 million people in America. But what worries me is that they almost threaten their very vulnerable, sometimes super fans. A lot of people that are super fans, some of them aren't particularly bright and they can be very easily led. And she worries them because she says, if this guy or this lady doesn't become the president, I'm going to leave the country. So she's instilling a lot of fear into her followers. And also, she doesn't really know what she's talking about. If you're very bright, someone like Elon Musk, and you fact check, I think it's okay. But if God has given you the gift of singing, he's not really going to make you very clever as well. So a lot of these people that are going on and on about politics, they don't know what they talk about and they don't fact check. So people like Taylor Swift, I think, should stay out of politics. Her management have told her before to do that, but she still carries on. And also, a lot of her Swifties are not even able to vote because obviously you have to be 18 to vote in the US. And look at Carol Vorderman. She was so involved in politics. She made so many people vote for Labour. And look at the mess we're in now. And now
Yeah,
she's
but
got
hold on a minute, Paula. I don't want to. It's just you can't. You can't make an assumption that Taylor Swift isn't bright. If you watch any of the, if you look at any of the documentaries about her, she does actually seem to be a very bright woman. But you can't dismiss what she's doing because she's not bright, and then also dismiss Carol Vorderman, who clearly is very bright. I mean, which way are you going on this?
Well, basically, Carol Vorderman, the only reason she hated Conservatives was because she had a fallout with her friend, a vendetta with Michelle Mone. So that's one of the main reasons. She used to be in cahoots with Boris Johnson before, so let's not forget about that. Sometimes people go to a certain party because of their own personal interests. She doesn't like the Conservative Party. That's why she was awful. And now, when everything's gone terrible, she's off LBC, hardly on Twitter, and now she's created a problem, and now she's disappeared. And I don't think Taylor Swift is particularly bright. She's obviously very gifted at singing. Look at Elon Musk. He's very clever. He fact-checks. Taylor Swift just says anything without fact-checking, and I don't think that means you're a clever person.
I think Elon Musk has actually needed to fact-check and he's withdrawn some of his own posts, isn't he? Yeah, clearly.
I mean, Elon Musk is...
Neil, I mean, would you be influenced by any celebrity on this?
No, certainly not. I make my own mind up, and that's what everybody should do. You know, when you see the likes of Emma Thompson, who's flying back first class from Los Angeles to attend a climate change alarmist rally in Trafalgar Square, and the absurdity of the way these people behave is manifest, isn't it? I don't know anything about Taylor Swift, and I'd perhaps be prepared to be guided by what her mother thinks, because Taylor Swift is a vast money-making machine managed by her mother, who has masterminded her career. And yes, she's got 70 million followers on Twitter and $500 million in the bank. So, you know, there's something to be said for that, isn't there? But as to her political views, no, I wouldn't be guided for one second by them. You know, you've got a lot of naive and deluded people. I remember in 1997 when, you know, the revolution was going to take place. You had all manner of lovies coming out of the woodwork to support this bright new dawn for British politics. 5 years later, with the Iraq War and all the enormities of the Blair corrupt years, it all looked very, very different. And I suppose we go through these phases, but no, I don't think that it's going to make any difference ultimately to the results in the polls. Some idiots, I suppose, will be guided by what celebs do, but I don't think the numbers are going to be that great in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, so if it doesn't make a huge difference, Paula, in Neil's view, should we really get our knickers in a twist about it?
I think so, because as Neil was just talking about, a lot of these super fans, they're very, very easily led. And look at Stormzy. He was in cahoots with Corbyn. And that didn't even help him. He only got 20,000 votes anyway. But what it does do is alienate some of his followers and just causes problems from a PR point of view. I just don't see the point in them getting involved. And, yeah, just keep out of it. It's very serious politics at the moment. And if you don't know what you're talking about, as I think a lot of singers don't, keep out of it. If you want to make bold statements without fact-checking, you're really influencing people, and you're doing it without the proper information. So definitely stay out of it.
But I've got to ask you on the back of that, do you think Elon Musk should keep out of it then? And, of course, he's not...
No, because he's extremely intelligent.
All right, so but how can it be, Paula, then, that you know, some celebrities need to keep out of it, but others don't? I mean, he's offering $1 million a day to people who register to vote.
OK, for instance, Jeremy Clarkson, he doesn't keep out of politics, but he's very intelligent and he's a columnist as well. So if you're a singer, I don't know why you're getting involved in politics. If you're a writer, if you're a businessman, extremely successful one like Elon Musk, we want to hear your views because you're intelligent.
And forgive me for cutting Neil out of this, but what you're basically saying, Paula, is that if celebrities who don't agree with what you think are doing the wrong thing, but if they're doing what you do agree with, then you think it's fine.
No, that's wrong. It's not about whether you're left or right. It's whether you fact-check what you say. Some of these celebrities just say something and they don't fact-check it and it's completely wrong. Obviously, I'm not a Labour supporter, but if someone says something about Labour, so that they've done good in the past to help people vote for them, I'd be like, OK, they have actually done that in the past. But what the people on the left are doing are lying. They're not fact-checking. They're just talking rubbish, basically. So it's not about left or right. It's about know what you're talking about or don't talk about politics if you're a celebrity.
But, Neil, isn't it about the fact that once you are a celebrity, you get used to the press, for instance, the media hanging on your every word, and that is what lures them into politics or political speaking.
Yeah, and of course there are a lot of celebs who are not limousine liberals, as I call them, and vote for right-wing parties. But that's not such good headlines in the lefty newspapers, is it? And so right-wingers tend to be rather more reticent about imposing their views upon the public. Having said that, I mean, I had celebs support me when I was an MP. Bill Roach from Coronation Street was a constituent of mine. I mean, Ken Dodd came and did an event for me in our house. He was a lifelong Conservative voter, but they didn't lecture and lecture the public on their political views. They weren't a secret. They didn't go out there and say, look at me, and vote the same way as I do, because otherwise the world's going to come to an end. I think these people ultimately have such big egos that they think that they are actually bigger than they are. And yes, maybe some callow teenager with no understanding of the real world might be induced to follow their example. But actually, we know that 18, 21-year-olds, very large numbers of them don't even register to vote. For that relief, much thanks, perhaps. But so I don't get too worked up about this.
Sorry to interrupt, Neil, Paula, good to see you both. Thanks very much indeed. But we want to take you to Samoa, where the Prime Minister is speaking.
Let's see if we can find it. He is actually speaking live right now.
And with good reason. The nations of the Commonwealth are increasingly important to the UK. 56 countries, drawn from every continent, a third of humanity, all united by shared values and shared interests. It is completely unique. But I think that we can do more to seize its potential, to put the Commonwealth in the service of its people, to ensure it delivers where it matters. And in an unstable world, with authoritarian states challenging the rule of law, it is vital we show the power of democracies working together to solve the problems before us. Now, this summit was the first for His Majesty the King as head of the Commonwealth, and so we used this moment to open a new chapter for this organisation. We selected a new Secretary-General this afternoon in the highly respected Shirley Boxwood, and I want to pay tribute to her campaign, which has brought the whole Commonwealth together. Now I look forward to working with her to set a new, ambitious and more focused agenda. My message is that the UK is back, reconnecting, open for business, working in partnership with others to solve shared challenges. And together we must harness the power of the Commonwealth to truly make it count. The key test here is growth. The Commonwealth represents a market for British business set to be worth nearly $20 trillion by 2027, including 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world, with Guyana topping that list. And because of our deep ties, trade costs are lower between Commonwealth economies and investment flows are higher. We must do more to maximise that advantage. So we agreed a plan here in Samoa to boost investment across the Commonwealth. I announced today the new UK Centre for Trade Expertise to turbocharge trade and growth in developing countries, which will, in the end, benefit all of us. And after my bilateral meetings here with leaders and business people, we've also delivered £1 billion worth of new investment into the UK, a vote of confidence in the economic stability my government brings. We marked Australia's ratification of our accession to the CPTPP and created a new Pacific Business Club, helping British companies to bid for $6 billion of multilateral development bank contracts, and strengthened our ties with this region that is powering global growth. All of this comes just after our International Investment Summit, which brought in over £60 billion to the UK. We're working around the clock to build the international partnerships that we need to create tens of thousands of good jobs and drive growth into every part of the United Kingdom. We also want to see the Commonwealth put a renewed focus on climate change. As the first serving Prime Minister to visit a Pacific Island country, it is humbling to see the impact of the climate crisis here and to hear the fears of the people of Samoa. It underlines the need to act. And that's why we restored UK climate leadership, acting at home to transform our energy sector, and acting internationally, providing new support to help island communities like this. Action to preserve nature, save coral reefs, and cut plastic pollution. And calling for more ambition at COP in just a few weeks' time. The Commonwealth has a powerful voice on these issues, and we must use it. Finally, I've had constructive bilateral discussions here on security. Now I'll take some questions, starting, I think, Chris, with you at the BBC.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Chris Mason at BBC News. Do you consider Israel's airstrikes to be proportionate? And if I may, you call yourself a pro-business party, so what do you say to businesses this weekend anticipating being clobbered for more tax? Thank you.
On the question of the strikes, I think we need to be really clear that Israel does have the right to defend itself. But we are urging and have been urging all sides to show restraint, and that's why I'm very clear today Iran should not be responding to this. Those are really important messages of de-escalation that at this moment in time I think it's very important everybody needs to heed. In relation to the budget, obviously I'm not going to get drawn on the budget which will be laid out on Wednesday of this week. I think I'm going now to Beth, Sky.
Thank you. Prime Minister, oh, blimey, that's loud, sorry. Prime Minister, there has been somewhat of a backlash back in the UK to your shares do not fit into your definition of working people. Are you, as some of your critics argue, plotting a war against Middle Britain?
No. Let me be clear about that. What we're doing is two things in the budget. The first is fixing the foundations, which is dealing with the inheritance that we've got, including the £22 billion black hole. We have to deal with that. In the past, for the last 14 years, leaders have walked past those problems, created fictions, and I'm not prepared to do that. We're going to fix the foundations. And having fixed the foundations, we're going to rebuild our country, and that is a very clear plan to ensure that people are better off, their living standards go up wherever they live across the United Kingdom, to make sure that our NHS is not just back on its feet, but fit for the future, and to ensure that we've got the public services that the public are entitled to and deserve. And that's my focus. That's why I came into politics, and that is the mission of this government. Thank you. Romilly at ITV.
Did you lose the battle, and have you damaged relations with Commonwealth countries with your attempt at a hard line on this?
Well, let me first be clear that the slave trade, slave practice was abhorrent, and it's very important that we start from there. Abhorrent is the right word. We've actually had a very positive 2 days here in Samoa. There is been a communique out today, which is positive. It talks about the shared challenges that we have. The dominant theme of the 2 days has been resilience and climate. And obviously this is quite a long communique. It's one paragraph, I think, in 20-something paragraphs, noting the call for discussion, agreeing a time for conversations. And that's all that's in the communique. Obviously, I mean, the next opportunity to look at this, there's a UK Caribbean forum next year, which is a Foreign Secretary level meeting, and which then report to leaders. Thank you. Lizzie from the Daily Mirror.
Thank you, Lizzie Buchan, Daily Mirror. Prime Minister, you've been calling for restraint in the Middle East for some time, but are you concerned that Israel's no longer listening? And are Israel and Iran on course for an all-out war?
Look, I mean, the most important thing here is de-escalation. And yes, we've been calling for that for some time. As you know, I made a call myself to the President of Iran and have repeatedly had discussions with others in the region, including, of course, the Prime Minister of Israel. And we must continue to do so. That's what diplomacy is. It takes time, but it is important that we continue to do so because the single most important thing now is de-escalation across the region. Thank you. Nick from the Daily Telegraph.
Thank you. In your opening remarks, you said the Commonwealth should demonstrate the power of democracies working against authoritarian states. More than 40 Commonwealth nations are part of the Belt and Road Initiative, and the new Secretary-General said last month that when it comes to containing China's economic influence, the Commonwealth shouldn't be poking its nose where it's not needed. Is she right? Or should the Commonwealth become more geopolitical, and should Britain be encouraging other members to reduce their reliance on China?
Well, look, I mean, thank you for that question, because I think it goes centrally to one of the issues we're discussing here, which is the Commonwealth obviously has a strong shared history, but the question is, what is the focus as we go forward? And I've been really clear in the discussions I've had in the last few days, and there's been a lot of discussion about this, that the focus ought to be on our values and democracy and the rule of law, because they are a threat, but also being clear that we have a shared interest in trade as well as we go forward. So that's the way I look at it. But I do think with that renewed focus, we should remind ourselves of our values, the rule of law and democracy, and use that as the sort of energy, if you like, to go forward into the future with the Commonwealth. Ryan at the Sun. Right.
Prime Minister, you said there's tough decisions to come at the budget. Some working people are now fearing taxes are going up, businesses expecting a hit. Can you offer any light at the end of the tunnel for the public fearing next week's budget?
Yes, and that is that we are fixing the foundations, which is tough, but we're doing it for a purpose. And that is because I believe very strongly that if we fix the foundations, take the tough decisions, scrub it down, and make sure that our economy is on a very stable footing, that's what it will do, that is the best platform for rebuilding the country. And I am heartened by the fact that at our investment summit, £63 billion worth of money, investment into Britain was pledged, put down. There's been other sums since then, but that is only happening because they see a government that's serious.
Let's leave the Prime Minister there, because we're sort of going over old ground once again now. And we're joined in the studio by political editor of HuffPost UK, Kevin Schofield, and the journalist Claire Muldoon. Morning to you. I mean,
morning.
I have to say, you were both sighing through that. I mean, I don't know when I last heard a news conference where really no questions were answered at all.
Yeah, I mean, he's not showbiz, he's not box office, I have to say, when it comes to creating news. You kind of go into Keir Starmer press conferences expecting the worst in terms of new news lines, but that was a cracker, because there was really nothing that he was saying there that he hadn't said before. He won't obviously be drawn on the budget. That's the stock answer, so we're not going to get any real words out of him on that. And what he was saying on Israel and what he was saying on reparations for slavery, again, nothing really that's going to move the markets.
Well, he said those before.
Yeah, exactly. There's nothing.
What did we expect? You know, there's been no change. The definition, I mean, they ran their manifesto and their the run-up to the election on the fact that they were the party of change. They wanted to change. How many times did he say, what was it, fix the foundation? Between when we fix those foundations, we can then build the country, and that is our clear plan. Well, I'm sorry, come on.
He's flown an awful long way
Just to say that.
Just to say the same thing over and over again. Wouldn't you think his comms team would have said to him, give them something new, give them tomorrow's headline, say something exciting and
I mean, the
interesting.
way these... I've been on a few of these trips before, and the way these trips normally work is the travelling pack, their papers have spent an awful lot of money for them to be there, so they get given stuff, stories that you know, they wouldn't otherwise get. But I've not really seen anything in any of the papers or online to suggest that, you know, they've gone armed with stories, things that are going to
number
change
10 poems have been absolutely woeful since the beginning. I have never ever encountered in all the years of covering these stories such a bad director of comms team.
There's been no discussion about money. But we have agreed to have more conversations.
Yeah, I think it's been kicked into the long grass.
Yeah,
you know,
but he hasn't therefore drawn a line, has he?
No, he hasn't. I mean, number 10's line going into the summit was, we don't pay reparations, there will be no apology. Obviously, a lot of the countries have said, well, fair enough, but we still want to talk about it. This is still a live issue. And you're right, it's now he's had to compromise, really, by saying, well, OK, we can discuss it. And there may well be reparations of some kind, but non-financial, because obviously we don't have any money to pay anything. But this is something that's going to come back again and again. It certainly hasn't been killed off, put it that way.
Wow. I just don't understand why you would go all the way to Samoa, which obviously is important that he's there, but he needs to do more than just be there. He needs to say something.
He's a statesman, for heaven's sake. We need to hear. He's supposed to be leading the country. He's supposed to be leading the people who voted for him. And I can hand on heart say the ones that I know have voted Labour are now have got massive amounts of buyer's remorse. They really, really have.
That's why he should stand up and say something, at least say, look, this budget may be hard, but I promise you you will feel better for it, or it will be driving us forward, or to say something that would make tomorrow's headline. But all he said was yes and no, and
exactly.
Then he came out with the same phrase.
Exactly.
What he did say, though, was a key test for the government is growth. We heard all that before the election.
Yes.
Yeah.
What we're not seeing, and so what's leaked out of the budget, is anything which is going to drive growth.
Drive the growth, drive the GDP, drive the ability to fix the foundations, build the country and have a clear plan. There is nothing that he has said there as a statesman, as the head of this country, to stand up and say, look, guys, we're all in this together. We do have a plan. We're going to make this work. Please just trust us. There was nothing.
Well, that's why
that could have been said.
That's why so much hinges on this budget. This is almost like day one of the government. They've been in power since July, but everything will hinge on this.
They had 14 years in opposition, Kevin.
Whether it's successful or not. No, but the budget, it's 35 billion. Put that is it. That is they're throwing all the eggs into that basket. And if it flops, then they're in an awful lot of trouble.
Here's my concern, and I hope it doesn't happen, because it would be very bad for the country. But is there at least a possibility we might see the markets react as badly as we saw after the mini-budget?
Well, I think that was part of the reason why they announced a couple of days ago, so a week in advance of the budget, that they're going to change the fiscal rules. They're going to borrow.
And gilt yields went up, which is bad news.
Absolutely. So it's £50 billion extra worth of borrowing. And as we know from the mini-budget, the markets are king, effectively. If they give it the thumbs down, then Rachel Reeves and the whole country is in an awful lot of bother.
Dipping their toe in the water.
They're hoping that by giving them an early warning that come Wednesday night, Thursday morning, the markets will be calm and they will wait to see how the budget is implemented. But again, it is a bit of a gamble.
But moreover, with that as well, with the election in America looming, what the temperature would be like between a Trump and Starmer partnership. You know what? I mean, that is just going to be a big thing too.
Yeah, and there he mentioned there that there was a UK-Caribbean conference coming up next year to which all the foreign ministers will be invited. Well, David Lammy is our Foreign Secretary, and he has already been pretty outspoken about Caribbean reparations.
He's been very quiet this week,
He has, yes.
He's been noticeably quiet.
Maybe he's wearing a mask.
So we'll see.
Halloween is coming up.
We'll see if he even is still Foreign Secretary by the time
Well, Keir Starmer is
that
continuing to speak, and we'll obviously bring you the highlights of what he has to say.
Here's the weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We are expecting some rain around this weekend, particularly in the northwest, and it will turn windy for a time, but otherwise there's lots of dry, fine, settled weather around for this weekend. A cooler start, perhaps with some pockets of mist and fog, cloudy across parts of Sussex, Kent, East Anglia, for example. This cloud may bring some rain at times. Otherwise largely dry across much of England and Wales. A different story across western parts of Scotland, though, and Northern Ireland. Quite a wet afternoon on offer here with some heavier downpours and some fairly blustery winds in the northwest too. But across the south, temperatures just above average for the time of year, so feeling rather pleasant where you do catch the sunshine. As we head into this evening then, that rain is going to continue across parts of Scotland, generally clearing the far west, but still plenty of blustery showers behind that, and that rain could turn rather heavy at times too. Once again, clearing the far west of Northern Ireland, still some cloud around, but any rain generally clearing the far east. Otherwise, largely dry across much of England and Wales, still with that lingering cloud though across the southeast, which may just produce still a little bit of rain, but on the whole, it's generally turning drier as we head overnight. This frontal system, as it moves its way to the southeast, generally a weakening feature, so by the time it reaches the south, staying largely dry, and that brings plenty of clear spells overnight too. And that also means it's going to be feeling a little bit cooler than it has done over recent nights. May even just see the odd spot of frost around northern parts too. Otherwise, for Sunday, we've got high pressure building, plenty of dry, bright weather, plenty of autumnal sunshine too. We are going to see a change from the northwest though as this next weather front slowly pushes its way in, so some quite heavy downpours of rain by the time we reach the afternoon across Northern Ireland and across western parts of Scotland. And once again, those blustery winds continuing too. Temperatures a touch down compared to today, otherwise still feeling pleasant in the sunshine.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're giving luck.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
National Trust Director General has said something rather curious. She's admitted that 70% of the charity's staff are Union Jack-hating progressive activists. Yes, this was speaking at a Labour Party fringe event. The boss of the charity, Hilary McGrady, acknowledged that there was a gap between her staff's views and the views held by the wider public. So was she being honest? Joining me now to discuss this is historian and broadcaster Rafe Haydel-Mankoo, who I believe is with me. Rafe, thank you very much indeed. Can this be true?
The founders of the National Trust and later figures involved in it, like my hero James Lees-Milne, were really motivated by love of nation. But I think that love of nation in the Trust has become actively, national self-loathing. And that's really the state of modern Britain. And with the Trust, I mean, what we've done is we've actually entrusted our national heritage to those people who actually actively despise our national heritage, and it's utter madness.
Have these people wanted to take over charities like the National Trust for their political ends, or is it just something that happens? Is it just the type of people who work in charities?
This has been part of the long march through the institutions, that people need to understand that Britain is now a post-revolutionary society. So the buildings that house our institutions look the same, but the people who now run them bear no comparison to the generations who lovingly built and ran them. They are cuckoos in the nest, and we need to understand that. And of course, once you realize that, of course, that explains completely why, the National Trust and others have crudely tried to denigrate our national heroes and link them and their houses to colonialism and slavery, as they ludicrously tried to do.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Morning to you. Sir Keir Starmer says number 10 is not plotting a war against the middle classes.
This comes as the Prime Minister takes to the stage in Saumur, following a meeting with the Commonwealth heads of government.
He also says now is the time for a conversation around reparatory justice, but says none of the discussions have been about money.
Yes, we heard, didn't we, that it could cost up to £18 trillion if financial reparations for our part in the slave trade were to be paid. The Prime Minister says that money is not on the table, but there is a line in the joint communiqué about reparatory justice.
He's also said that Israel has the right to defend itself. That's after the Israeli government fired a barrage of missiles on military targets across Iran in the latest escalation of the conflict, with fears that Tehran could now retaliate.
Well, the King has said he hopes he survives long enough to see Samoa again as he bids farewell to the Pacific Islands.
BBC Panorama is under fire for their episode covering the Nottingham stabbings. The mother of victim Barnaby Webber calls it shameful, and she'll be joining us shortly.
And there's a bit of a treat for you tonight because the clocks go back, and that means an extra hour of hopefully glorious sleep.
Yes, good morning. It's a big day in the Premier League with Manchester City and Aston Villa both in action. The Lionesses were edged out, meanwhile, by Germany at Wembley last night. England's cricketers, meanwhile, are all out for 112 against Pakistan in Rawalpindi.
Hello, good morning. Lots of fine weather around this weekend, but not for all. If you want to know where the wet and windy weather's going to be, then stay tuned for all the details.
It's just gone 8 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Right, well, we better crack on with what the Prime Minister's just been saying, because there's an awful lot to get through, actually, in a way, in that there's lots of different topics to discuss. He didn't really say a great deal. He did say the upcoming budget will not be a war against the middle classes. That, of course, following all these tensions about potential tax rises and what a definition of a working person actually is. It seems to keep changing.
If I'd been there, I'd have asked him that dead straight.
Yeah,
Are you a working person?
Because the Chancellor has said he is.
Because he'd have to answer yes or no, and either would be interesting. Yeah, I'm
but that
surprised.
doesn't fit with his own definition.
No, I know.
Yeah, I would have asked him that.
Anyway, and then he also addressed the issue of reparations, stating that conversations around reparatory justice had been agreed at the summit, but that no conversations had taken place about money.
Let's talk to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Morning, Catherine. I mean, it was a news conference that said very little.
Well, indeed. And just to mention the working person, Sir Keir Starmer has been asked previously directly if he is a working person, and it may not amaze viewers to hear that he's basically skirted answering that. Of course, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, yesterday gave it that he was a working person because he earns a lot of money from his job as the Prime Minister. The press conference
was lacklustre, wasn't it?
It was. Obviously, they're in the Pacific. As he said, he is the first sitting Prime Minister ever to visit one of these Pacific islands, which is something. They've gone a very, very long way to be there. These 56 countries in the Commonwealth, there's plenty of no-shows, including Canada, for instance, haven't bothered to turn up. But he wants to send the message that they've been talking about trade and about climate change, not about the money that many of the Commonwealth countries would like us to be paying in reparations. We did hear last week, didn't we, that could be up to 18 trillion, which clearly isn't going to happen. We can't afford it. We can't begin
We wouldn't have that sort of money if we saved up for decades.
Of course not. Of course not. And as Boris Johnson has pointed out in today's Daily Mail, China ultimately is responsible for COVID. Whether it came out of a wet market or whether it came out of a lab, we will never know. But it came from China. It led to pretty much a shutdown of the global economy. It had a desperate effect on all of our lives. If anybody should be paying reparations, perhaps it should be China. Of course, there's no prospect of that.
No, but it's an interesting column, he writes. It's in today's Mail. For the first time in ages, I think Boris Johnson has made a very good argument there. He weighs up the damage done by slavery, and everybody acknowledges that that was a terrible time, against what happened out of Wuhan, and says, well, you know, how come China doesn't take what we take? But it's almost as though Britain sits back and says, OK, it's all our fault, when it wasn't.
Indeed, indeed.
We'll be debating that a bit later.
I mean, with COVID and China, it's because China is literally so powerful that the rest of the world, individual countries can't afford to upset them. But anyway, the Prime Minister very keen to say that they can do more, the Commonwealth, in terms of trade, in terms of climate change. Of course, these Pacific countries are right on the very forefront of that. Saying that, yes, admitting that there is a line in this communique about reparatory justice, but I think critical to say, he says none of the discussions have been about money. Our position has been very clear about that. So they're not budging on that.
No. What strikes me with this, though, is when you do that, when you hold those sort of news conferences, you've got to think about your audience. And the vast majority of his audience will be the UK. At which point he says, in that sense, climate is not what we need to be talking about at the moment, is it? It's about budget, it's about where we are, at which all he says is, well, I'm not going to talk about the budget apart from to say it will fix the foundations, which tells us nothing.
Yes, well, this is the answer that you always get ahead of a budget. But the reality is that lots of things that are coming on Wednesday have been trailed extensively. And the reason they've done this is they're very worried about scaring the horses, frightening the markets after what happened with Liz Truss's budget.
They must be really worried about that.
They've drip-fed out bits and pieces so that come Wednesday, there won't be any sort of
big
shock reaction. So we do know that, OK, national insurance, VAT, income tax headline rates are not rising, but we also know that there are going to be lots of very painful tax rises, likely to include capital gains tax, inheritance tax, possibly rises to fuel duty. And we also know that national insurance employers' contributions are going up. That's going to raise probably 15 billion. Now, OK, the government will say that's on employers, it's not a tax on working people, but ultimately taxes that businesses pay have to be accounted for somehow. So that may feed through to workers in terms of lower pay awards or employers, paying less into workplace pensions.
And also, higher prices for us punters.
Indeed. I mean, look, it's going to be very, very difficult, and they're looking at raising, we've heard ad infinitum, haven't we, about this £22 billion black hole that they say they've found. They say that things were vastly worse than they could ever have imagined. Some of it, 9 billion of that, was of their own making with the public sector pay awards. Now, you could say those were necessary, but still. But the public finances are in a terrible state. We have an astronomical national debt. And the reality is that whoever was in charge after the last election was going to have to make difficult choices now. The Conservatives gave those cuts in national insurance as a sweetener, trying to convince people to stick with them. Labour have stuck with those, but they do need to get money from somewhere because public services are in a terrible state. So it's hard. And also just linked to that, there's going to be tax rises for day-to-day spending. But the Chancellor is rewriting her fiscal rules to allow for billions and billions of extra money on borrowing for things like infrastructure spending, which the government feels is necessary to try to get growth that we desperately need and haven't really had much for a long time.
And in just one name, because we don't yet know who the next leader of the Tories are, who is going to reply to Rachel Reeves when she stands up and gives the budget?
Well, it will be the current acting leader of the opposition, Rishi Sunak, the former Prime Minister.
He's a dead duck, politically.
Well,
maybe he'll go out with a spark.
With a bang, yeah, but no one's going to pay any attention, are they? We've got to leave it there, Catherine. We've talked too much already, but thank you very much indeed.
Lots of people already pointing out that Keir Starmer's gone all the way to Samoa, but it looks like he could have been in a conference centre down the road.
Well...
And that's true. I mean...
I know you're not impressed with that.
No, I just think... Well, look, compare it to the King and Queen's visit, where we saw a lot of Samoa. It would have been nice to have a touch of...
Yes, but he wouldn't have organised the room there. It would have been organised for him. There you go.
Look, I mean, honestly, look at that. Talk about...
It's night time there, so maybe that's a big window, so there's not much to see, is there?
Clearly not.
Anyway, I'm not impressed.
I'm not impressed with their comms team. I just think they're not very,
good.
Working very hard. Maybe they're not working people.
Oh, God, don't start.
Sorry.
The King and Queen aren't... I don't know if they're working people or not. Probably not, to be fair. Anyway, they have bid farewell to Samoa. The King saying he hopes to survive long enough to see the country again.
Which strikes us as a bit sad. I hope he said it with a laugh. This comes after he delivered a landmark speech where he did address the issue of reparations.
Well, our royal correspondent Cameron Walker is there.
When the King and Queen arrived at Sydney Airport at the start of their 10-day tour of Australia and Samoa, it was absolutely chucking it down with rain on the tarmac. And I'm afraid to say, as the King and Queen depart Samoa, it is pretty much the same weather, biblical rainfall. But the Samoans see this as a good thing. It's a good luck charm because it means potentially there will be a good harvest this year. And the King earlier on this morning was, alongside the Queen, was at a local village where he told the villagers he hopes to survive long enough to return to Samoa. He was also made a High Chief of the local district. And as you can see, they are boarding right now the Royal Australian Air Force jet, which will take them part way back to the United Kingdom. And it has been a grueling 10 days for their Majesties of many engagements, up to 10 engagements a day in some parts. And it has been an incredibly important trip for the King and Queen, but the King especially because it is a trip of first. The first time he has visited a realm outside the United Kingdom where he reigns as head of state, that's Australia, but also it's the first time he has addressed the 56 Commonwealth heads of government as the institution's head, and he would have been very determined to be here. And 6 months ago we didn't know if he would be here because of his cancer diagnosis, but clearly doctors have given him the green light, and on the whole it's been a pretty successful tour despite one or two small protests. He paused his cancer treatments while he was here in Australia and Samoa. As soon as he returns to London, that cancer treatment resumes.
Well, a cheery wave goodbye. Let's hope the King does get to see Samoa again. Let's talk to former royal correspondent at The Sun, Charles Ray. We're really hoping, Charles, when he made that comment saying, I hope I live long enough to come back, he must have done that with a bit of a glint in his eye, mustn't he?
Oh, it was done. Good morning to you both. It was done tongue in cheek. I mean, his one-liners are quite good usually, and it wouldn't have been thinking of anything other than he hopefully will come back one day. I have to say though, I thought it was a fabulous tour. And, when you think that some of the Republicans in Australia were dubbing it the farewell tour, well, it turns out it's please come back soon tour.
Absolutely. I mean, it's always been said about the Australians, they like to talk the Republican language until they actually get to meet a royal, and the magic just rubs off, doesn't it?
Well, I've been to Australia every time I've been to Australia, there's always been talk of republicanism and everything else. And it turns out in the end, with the greatest respect to them, to be a damn squib. Now, of all the people and all the tours that I've covered, the people turn out in their droves. We saw crowds of between 8,000 and 10,000 in some places in Australia, and they were very welcoming of the monarchy, and it'll still be welcoming again in the very near future. And the same in Samoa was much more colourful because of the background and everything else. I agree with you, Anne. I think seeing Samoa was fabulous. I'd love to have gone there, but I have to say there was one stage where I saw the King and Queen sitting on those armchairs, and Camilla lifted her fan up to speak to the King, and I just thought it comes at the end. I just thought he just looked a little bit tired. It's been a grueling 9 days, and as Cameron said, up some of those jobs he was doing that day were up 10 functions. So I think he'll be glad to get back home, glad to restart his cancer treatment.
I mean, it is interesting because we look at it all and it does all look glamorous and all the rest of it. But as you say, these sort of trips are hard work, especially when you're 75 and especially when you're in the middle of this treatment. We can't underestimate that at all, can we?
Well, when I was doing these trips, I was a lot younger than 75, and I can assure you they were, they took it out of you. I mean, we had to stand around for hours and everything else, and we had to travel all the long journeys as well. And the King and Queen have done exactly the same. So, when he comes back, let's give him a few days off. He deserves it.
Do you think, I mean, this has been brought up by quite a few of our viewers this morning, they're looking at him, and although he looks all right, he looks, I don't know, not frail, but his age, I guess. A lot of people are saying, do you think he would ever stand down to let Prince William take over?
No, that's just not in their psyche. I mean, people keep on saying, even with with Elizabeth, she should retire and everything else. That's never in their thoughts at all. The monarchy exists, and when he passes on and dies, then William will become king. That's the way it is. He's not going to, give it all up and sit in some retirement home somewhere. That's just not going to happen at all. Never.
No, well, I'm glad to hear it too. Charles, as always, it's great to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, it's been very mixed weather for them down under, hasn't it? And I guess you could say it's mixed weather up here, although much colder and wetter, maybe. We'll find out. Here's your weather with Honor.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We are expecting some rain around this weekend, particularly in the northwest, and it will turn windy for a time, but otherwise there's lots of dry, fine, settled weather around for this weekend. A cooler start, perhaps with some pockets of mist and fog, cloudy across parts of Sussex, Kent, East Anglia, for example. This cloud may bring some rain at times. Otherwise largely dry across much of England and Wales. A different story across western parts of Scotland, though, and Northern Ireland. Quite a wet afternoon on offer here with some heavier downpours and some fairly blustery winds in the northwest too. But across the south, temperatures just above average for the time of year, so feeling rather pleasant where you do catch the sunshine. As we head into this evening, then, that rain is going to continue across parts of Scotland, generally clearing the far west, but still plenty of blustery showers behind that. And that rain could turn rather heavy at times too. Once again, clearing the far west of Northern Ireland, still some cloud around, but any rain generally clearing the far east. Otherwise, largely dry across much of England and Wales, still with that lingering cloud, though, across the southeast, which may just produce still a little bit of rain. But on the whole, it's generally turning drier as we head overnight. This frontal system, as it moves its way to the southeast, generally a weakening feature, so by the time it reaches the south, staying largely dry. And that brings plenty of clear spells overnight too. And that also means it's going to be feeling a little bit cooler than it has done over recent nights. May even just see the odd spot of frost around northern parts too. Otherwise, for Sunday, we've got high pressure building, plenty of dry, bright weather, plenty of autumnal sunshine too. We are going to see a change from the northwest, though, as this next weather front slowly pushes its way in. So some quite heavy downpours of rain by the time we reach the afternoon across Northern Ireland and across western parts of Scotland. And once again, those blustery winds continuing too. Temperatures a touch down compared to today, otherwise still feeling pleasant in the sunshine.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
60 days till Christmas, apparently.
Is that right?
So get saving.
It'll be on us before you know it.
Ah, well, it could actually be on us for one lucky winner. Because you could win your entire Christmas this year. It's our latest Great British giveaway.
So you could win £20,025 in tax-free cash. See, they're doing a clever thing with the 25s there. And then a further £5,000 cash to spend on all of your presents. And then there's another £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. So you could argue that Christmas entirely, but certainly Christmas lunch, would be on us too. If you fancy having Christmas free, here's all the details you need.
I wonder what's in the goodie bag.
Mugs.
Mugs.
I don't know what else we've
got a lot of stuff now.
Like what?
Brollies, T-shirts, water bottles, mugs, pens.
Well, it should be all
mouse
that
mats,
stuff.
little bags.
Who uses mouse mats anymore?
Oh, it's a thing.
Is it?
It's still a thing, mouse mats.
Okay.
I think we've got mouse mats. I could be wrong. Don't take my word for any of it, because you'd have to have a look on the shop
thing,
to see what exactly we can do. But I think there's mouse. I think I saw a mouse mat once. But anyway.
Well, win it first, and then you'll be able to look through.
Yes. Yeah. Send us a picture. Right, still to come, we're going to have a debate about reparations. Should we really be thinking about paying them? We'll talk about that more in a minute.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
You must be so proud of your daughter being so just amazingly brave and a model for other people who face illness.
I think we're proud of her all day, every day, and always have been. Liz has always given her all to anything she put her mind to, whether that was studying for her GCSE exams at school or whether it's been her photography and battling cancer. Liz never does anything by half, and we are so incredibly proud of her each and every day.
And Liz, I noticed a wonderful line from you saying that when you've got cancer, A-levels don't matter so much. That seems to me to be a very reasonable view to take and has given you then the chance to do these other amazing things that you will be doing more of in future with the London Ambulance Service. And I imagine many people will want to help you with your bucket list because they've now seen you and seen how brave you are.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we've already been overwhelmed by the responses and the support by so many people. I think when my mum originally posted the list, it received like 4,000 replies. It was insane, and still there's more. So from the bottom of our hearts, and especially mine, we just want to say thank you, because there's nothing that forces anyone to get in touch and say, hey, I have something you can do, pop over and do this or that, or it's just out of the generosity of their hearts. So thank you.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, we've been talking about it much of the morning, haven't we? But the UK has increasingly come under pressure to pay reparations for its historic role in the slave trade.
Yes, one academic says we need to pay £18 trillion.
Just like that.
Considering our annual sort of turnover in the country is 1.1 trillion. So, I mean, it's pie in the sky.
It ain't going to happen. But the question is, are we morally due it? Should we be thinking in those terms morally?
Do we pay for the sins of the father? Anyway, the Prime Minister has just addressed this in Samoa.
What else is he considering, you wonder? But anyway, let's get on to the moral debate, as you see it. We're joined by historian and broadcaster Rafe Haidel-Manku and director of Sanctuary Foundation, Dr. Krish Kandia. Very good morning to both of you. Thank you very much. Let's start with you, Dr. Krish, if we can. Why do you feel, I think you do feel, that we should be looking at the subject of reparations?
Good morning. Well, we have been paying reparations to countries that were affected by the slave trade. In fact, we paid slave owners. In 1833, the UK took out a loan of around £20 million. It's probably worth about £20 billion in today's money. And we only stopped paying that money back in 2015. It took us 183 years to pay that money back. And so this seems ridiculous, didn't we, that we paid reparations compensation for generations back to the people who owned the slaves, but we've never paid a penny to those people who were slaves themselves. This seems out of order and wrong. And surely we have some kind of moral responsibility to those who we terribly oppressed those generations ago.
Yeah, but they're dead, Krish.
Well, so were the original debtors to the people that we paid the slave owners. So that doesn't compute. And just because people are dead doesn't mean their ancestors weren't impacted. Think of our royal family. Where did most of our royal family's wealth come from? It actually came from colonialism, from the slave trade. And wealth builds up over generations. Well, the opposite is true too. Debt builds up over generations. Oppression impacts generations. So I don't think the fact that people have died is a reason not to seek justice.
Rafe, over to you.
Well, look, we have to be realistic here. Even though Britain was the world's most advanced democracy in 1833, the democracy back then was very different, and it was essential for the British government to pay the slave owners in order to get the legislation through Parliament. We're talking about an era of rotten boroughs and so forth. We have to accept that there's a degree of realpolitik. If that money hadn't been spent, the legislation wouldn't have been passed, and we wouldn't have freed the slaves at all. And in fact, you're also forgetting the vast amount of money that was spent, the sum equivalent to our entire modern defense budget, on the West Africa Squadron, the squadron that enforced an end to the slave trade on the high seas, including seizing foreign ships and including stopping Africans from continuing to engage in the slave trade. You know, Africans were the most opposed to the abolition of the slave trade. Remember, there were more slaves held in bondage by other Africans in Africa than were ever transported over the ocean. And in fact, this was probably the first time in human history that a power had deliberately made itself poorer in order to advance a moral good. And I think that's something that's worth celebrating, because slavery is universal. It's millennia old, tens of thousands of years old. But the evangelical Christian zeal that went through the British Empire in the 19th century was something completely unique. And in fact, the British Empire's second half was really about atoning for the sins of the first half. And that's something that's quite unique. And you have to also ask, who's going to pay these reparations? Out of a population of millions, there were only a few thousand slave owners. The vast majority of the British population lived lives of abject poverty akin to serfdom. So why should people today who descend from those serfs pay reparations? Then again, you know, 10 million people in this country are foreign born. Why on earth should they be expected to pay reparations? And then what about people from the Caribbean living here?
What intrigues me with this, Krish, is you're nodding away to all of that.
Well, I want to agree with Rafe that our ending of slavery was an incredible moment. And I also want to agree that it was evangelical Christianity that was at the heart of that. That's my faith. It's one of the proudest things of my faith. But that faith also teaches that you put things right. That there's a famous story of a little man that got stuck up a tree called Zacchaeus. And Jesus said to him, the only time I know that salvation has come to your house is you've begun to do justice. You've paid back the people that you've wronged. So I do agree with a lot of what Rafe has said, and I don't know how economically we sort this out, but we said this debate was about the morality of it, and that's something I think we can agree, that we do still owe the people that we oppressed some debt. Now, there are different ways that could work out. The Church of England, for example, last year put aside £100 million. And, you know, that's peanuts in the grand scheme of things, but it's a lot of money for the Church of England to say, we need to start to put things right. The National Trust started its own investigation of what they could do, whether that was money or an apology or some kind of acknowledgement in our history. So there are other things that we can do morally that aren't just about the money.
But, Rafe, I mean, isn't it true that we Britons were enslaved by the Romans? Goodness knows how long ago. You know, I mean, do we go back to Italy and demand reparation for that? How long can you look back?
Well, this is precisely the issue. At the same time as the Atlantic slave trade was carrying on, 1 million Europeans were enslaved by the North African states of Morocco, Tangier, etc., Tunisia, rather, etc., in the Barbary slave trade. The Islamic slave trade was carrying on for centuries before the British and the Europeans arrived, and carried on long after. We never hear any call for reparations from there. We never hear for any call for reparations from Africa either. But let's be clear here. Reparations are fundamentally a matter of tort law, and the purpose of reparations is to put the victim back into the position they were in before the harm was caused. But there is no one alive today who is a victim of British Empire slavery. If we were having this discussion in 1807 or 1833, I absolutely would support reparations to give to the slaves for the horrific conditions that they were being treated in. But of course, that was 6 or 7 generations ago. And there is no way you can tell me that the lives of the great-great-great-great-grandchildren of slaves today has been impinged by slavery. On the contrary, the lives of the descendants of slaves in the Caribbean, in North America, in Britain, are far better than if their ancestors had never left West Africa. And the evidence is quite clear. The richest black diaspora in the world are African Americans, followed by black Canadians and black Brits. But if you look at in the Caribbean, for example, in Barbados, the GDP per capita is $17,000 per year. In Benin, where the slaves came from, it's $1,300 a year. People in Barbados live for 15 years longer than they do in Benin and in West Africa. So by every measure you look at, being a descendant of a slave is not in any way being an oppressed person. On the contrary, the Caribbean states are middle-income countries who rank higher on the Human Development Index than countries like Brazil or Mexico, and that's because of their British colonial inheritance. The common law, the English language, the civil service, the parliamentary system, the judiciary have enabled the Caribbean nations to become global players, and there's actually a great deal to celebrate about their colonial legacy, not least of which, of course, the black populations now own the Caribbean islands. So that is actually, you could say, was the greatest reparations, the fact that they are self-governing and they own such a wonderful piece of territory.
Just a final brief thought from you on that, Chris. I mean, we've got to draw a line, haven't we?
Well, it's interesting when we're choosing to draw that line. If you go out for drinks with some mates at the pub and everyone else buys a round, but you exit out the back door when it's your turn to buy a round, that's not right, is it? So the fact that it's later...
No, but you wouldn't pay it back 200 years later.
Well, we've said that the current royal family are the beneficiaries of money that they made in those times of slavery. And that generational wealth is the reason why we have a very wealthy royal family. The same works in reverse. So money, debt, oppression, they have generational impact. And we just need to find a grown-up way to have the conversation and say, look, it's not just about money. When you go to Australia, when you go to New Zealand, and you have a public meeting, there's always a recognition of who originally owned that land. There's a way that developed countries have worked out how to deal with their colonial history.
Right, we are out of time, sadly. Rafe, Chris, thank you both very much indeed. Appreciate it. If you've got a view, gbnews.com/yourself.
So complex.
It is complex, and look, that was a nice, sensible discussion. However, I can't see how you've got to draw a line at some point.
If you keep looking back, will you ever look forward enough?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway, looking forward to the football for you and what matches we've got in store today. Aidan McGee's going to be here in just a moment.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, let's speak now to Sales Director at Savills for Quinta Properties, Raquel Santos, who is live for us in Portugal. Raquel, good to see you this morning. Why are all these celebrities flocking to Portugal all of a sudden?
Yeah, I guess it's just because of basically the great lifestyle that we have and security. You know, Portugal has kind of been a hidden, tucked away gem for quite a while that people didn't realize existed. And with the international flights that have, with the American flights coming in, it's kind of been put back on the map as a country that's worth visiting and worth investing in due to the secure investments that we offer in real estate.
Raquel, is it anything to do with tax rates? Because I think capital gains tax is, I think if it's over a certain amount, you pay half of your rate, which is 28%. Capital gains on shares and cryptocurrencies is 0. Is it anything to do with that? Because over here in the UK, big storm at the moment about millionaires apparently leaving in exodus because of the mooted increases in taxes in just a few weeks.
Yes, so obviously the alterations that are happening with the UK in terms of the tax that's being implemented on the capital gains, as you mentioned, we've definitely noticed has become a big drive, mostly on the vendor side as well, who are looking to sell because they don't want to be hit, with these higher capital gains, which is close to coming into effect.
Raquel, have you noticed then millionaires, high net worth people from the UK getting in touch with you looking to relocate?
Definitely. It's for multiple reasons, obviously, the changes that are due to come into place, obviously, and Portugal just seems to be a safe option always when things do kind of change. People opt to come into Portugal because we're quite steady, we're quite stable.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Sports time.
Yes, Aida's here, talking about a book. Actually, a book. There's not many sports books I'd read. I'd read this one.
No, I'd read this one too. Who's it by?
It's by, well, it's a collab, if you like, in musical terms. Harry Redknapp has written a book with Jamie Redknapp, his son, who he briefly managed, actually, at Southampton back in 2005. But broadly speaking, their careers were apart from this period right at the start in Bournemouth. But it's been serialised by The Times. Martin Samuel's done a piece on it today, as he's been doing for the last few days. And I found this really interesting because I didn't carry Harry. Sorry,
What, sorry?
No, I covered Harry during his period at West Ham right at the start of my career 20 years ago. And he references that period and also some periods since. But he says he really struggled mentally as a manager. I can understand that, but he didn't seem like that sort of bloke to me. He was quite an avuncular character even 20 years ago. And Jamie Redknapp has been saying, his son obviously has been saying that, the fact that he got so low was the reason I never became a manager. Now, I think there's a financial element to this as well because, yes, it's hugely rewarding being a manager in Jamie's era in the last 15, 20 years, or even in the future. So players of his generation have done quite well out of it, but it's so short-term. And I think that he made the right decision going into broadcasting back in 2005, but he refers back quite tellingly to the period where his dad was in charge at West Ham and Tottenham and Portsmouth elsewhere. I'll just read you the quote.
I was going to say the stress also, they almost get worse flack than the players now, don't they?
Oh, without doubt. Well, I mean, Arsene Wenger famously said, if the manager's not the most important person at the club, why is he the first person to be sacked? Which I thought was interesting. The reality is that it's much cheaper to sack the manager than it is to sack a squad of players. But Harry's quotes, this is really interesting because this is a guy who, I think, he didn't use this word himself, but Bobby Robson used the word football is a drug. And Harry Redknapp would be very much from that sort of school of thought. But he said, I don't miss it as much as I thought I would. I don't miss the aggravation of it. The bad days were horrendous. I look back and it's scary how low I used to get. Now I think about it, really scary place where now people might look at me and think he needs help. And so he said he used to go back to his flat when he was at West Ham, and that wasn't where he was living, sort of, day to day. But when he was a manager, he was living in a flat in London, managing West Ham. That's what they do. And he said, I used to sit on the sofa and stare at the ceiling after a bad defeat. I mean, the highs were extremely high, the lows extremely low.
Very low.
There was a player called Gavin Peacock who said to me that after he finished playing, he went to become a pastor in Canada. He went into the priesthood. And he said the problem with football, as great as it was, he said that the highs were up here, the lows were down there. He never managed to get any equilibrium in his life, and that's just...
So Jamie's saying he saw his father go through that.
Yeah,
He thought,
and
no,
it
I
turned
don't
him off
want that.
management. Yeah, and as lucrative as it is, and as great a job as it can be, you know, Harry worked at most clubs, and he did 3 or 4 years at each one. I think the era of that has long since gone. I mean, you're lucky to get. I mean, you last less time than a cabinet minister these days. So
saying something.
Yeah, but it used to be when I was studying politics. I think the average tenure of a cabinet minister was something like 11 months. The football manager was probably about 2.5 years, and that's completely changed these days with the short-termism. I imagine.
It has, but you know, it'd be an interesting read because they're two really nice fellas.
Absolutely.
Can we talk cricket?
Yes.
Dare we talk cricket?
As brief as England's stand, yeah, it is 112 all out England. This is disappointing because they were leading in the series in Pakistan, but they really capitulated in Rawalpindi, and as I say, 112 all out. They set Pakistan a target of 36 to win. They achieved that in the last few minutes, in a matter of minutes, and that's a source of huge embarrassment because they face New Zealand pretty soon, and it puts pressure on some of the selectors, not to mention some of the players, but it was the conditions that did for them as well, but they should have done better, albeit against some very talented Pakistani spinners.
OK, Aidan, we are out of time.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Good to see you this morning. I'll see you tomorrow.
Absolutely. OK, right, do stay with us. Still to come, one journalist decided to put train Wi-Fi, that's Wi-Fi on trains, to the test. How many films do you think he managed to watch over his 8-hour journey? Where was he going? That's in the newspapers next with Kevin Schofield and Claire Muldoon.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
The Daily Mail now, Josh, and pub landlords have to worry about more than the optics when it comes to offensive banter,
Yeah,
it
this
seems.
is a really big story and important. Pub landlords could have to become banter cops to stop themselves being sued by staff offended by comments from customers under workers' rights reform. So, Labour, when they were part of their election process, they were like, we're going to reform workers' rights, and that all sounds good on paper, but there were issues in terms of how might it affect employees and fear from employees costing them more money. One of these things that they're sort of pushing through, though, is that in the Equality Act of 2010, part of the issue was that if you were offended at work or someone said something sexist or racist, something that affected you, the employer had to take some sort of, they had three chances to kind of take action.
Yeah.
Now, the employer should have taken action already. So employees can sue employers. Now, this has a big impact on us because we're comics and we perform in venues. And if some of the bar staff hear a joke that they don't like, then they can sue their employer, potentially, under this legislation.
So it's not punters?
Well, also, it could be like you're at a bar and some bloke is like, oh, I like that top, or whatever. That's not good behaviour. But the point is now that employee could sue their employer.
So, because, I mean, the sort of scenario I was imagining was that a barmaid was being maybe sexually harassed or
That's
something.
what they're focusing in this article, but other articles have gone down the free speech route.
OK.
And also venues and universities having lectures. We saw it at, in Edinburgh Fringe Festival and Sadowitz. He had his show cancelled not because of any punters, but because two of the 18-year-olds were working. They were upset.
There was a bar in Brighton, wasn't there? There was a story we covered a few weeks ago. A bar in Brighton threw some people out. Because...
They had turfs on the.
Turfs.
Yeah. GB News, the People's Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
8 8:45. Let's see what's in the papers on the lighter side of life.
Yeah.
At the minute with political editor of HuffPost, Kevin Schofield, and the journalist Claire Muldoon. Good morning, Claire. Let's talk turkey.
Let's talk turkey. What's happening in a few months' time, a few weeks away? It's Christmas.
Yes, it is, nearly.
And our wonderful, friendly chef from Italy, Gino De Campo, he's extolling the virtue of not eating turkey on Christmas Day. He would say it's the best day of the year. Why do you English and Scots and Welsh and Irish eat the worst meal of the day, turkey? Now, I don't know about that, but I really do love my Christmas lunch.
Yeah,
I really, really do.
Yeah, I love turkey. At Christmas,
But
I
you
try
sure
to
it's the
avoid
turkey
it.
you like? Because you just said to me, oh, cranberry sauce and gravy and bread sauce and
Yeah, I love all
Yorkshire
that.
puds and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
It's those things you like. The turkey's tasteless, isn't
I
it?
think the turkey's part of the whole ensemble. But I do like the accoutrements that
You
go
like...
with it.
Oh.
God, that's swallowed the dictionary
There we
this morning.
are.
You
There
like
we are.
turkey too?
I love a turkey too.
But
And
it divides. A lot of people really dislike it.
But I think there's so much choice now. I mean, now you've got all the supermarkets are offering their best of ranges, and that's what you would want to save up for at Christmas time and really go all out for it. If
That
you're,
nice turkey
you're doing it for
crown
your
with the
lunch.
bacon
well,
over
that's
it.
the thing.
Nice,
The turkey crowns are the best
Yeah.
because they are the most succulent, and you keep basting it. It's lovely, and especially if it's stuffed with great stuffing, which is just wonderful. And you just cover it in foil and you can keep it, but you need to rest it and then have all your crackers and have all your champagne, sit back and relax and enjoy the day.
Excited now.
I cannot wait.
I know, I'm salivating at the very thought.
Yeah.
It sounds wonderful. I mean, I don't like the turkey, but I like everything. I like the accoutrements.
You'll have your tree up in a wee while, won't you? You put your tree up early.
Yeah.
What,
In fact,
before
that's what I
December?
wanted to know. If anyone watching has got their tree up yet? Because it's very tempting.
No,
What, in October?
I'm doing mine in the
that's
third
always
week
done
in
it.
November.
Hang on,
What,
we're
someone's
nearly at the
already
end
done
of
it?
October.
Really?
Yeah, so November is... But
No,
if you're
it's too early.
going
It's
to
too
go to all
early.
the trouble of putting up the tree and dressing it and everything else, why just have it for a week or
Yes.
Well, no, yeah, but
I'm with you.
week hours, the last weekend in November is when they go on sale.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's when we buy
Normally,
the tree.
first weekend in December is when we do it.
That's
and
when...
you got
Well,
it up
that'll
for a
be the
month.
first Sunday of Advent
Yeah, a
then,
month
so
and a
that's
half.
when we're doing it.
Yeah. Do you not get sick of the sight of it if it's been up for weeks? and
No,
weeks?
not at all. It lights up the whole room, literally, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's lovely.
I think it's quite nice when it's gone. I enjoy it, but then it's nice when it's gone. It's just like a fresh start.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Kevin, I'm intrigued by this in the Times because a journalist, I know it is, has decided to, and appears to be surprised that Wi-Fi on trains isn't very good.
Yeah.
I mean, what a shocker.
No.
Have you never been on a train before?
I mean, yes, this is Ben Clatworthy of the Times. So what they got him to do was basically his entire working day was spent on the train to test train Wi-Fi. So the challenge was to watch as many James Bond films as he could.
Oh, what a tough day
just
at work,
using
then.
just using train Wi-Fi. Now he worked out it was 8 hours. He was everywhere. He went from London. He was up in Yorkshire. Eventually got back 8 hours later. Now he should
Oh, he was
have
very
in that
lucky then.
time been able to watch Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, and You Only Live Twice, and have some time to spare at the end.
Yeah.
But because the network connectivity, the Wi-Fi is
terrible.
rubbish. He just about managed to watch the first one, Dr. No, which lasts just under 2 hours. It took him 8 hours.
Why is
to do that.
Wi-Fi so bad on the trains?
Well, because it's just it's the same as your phones. It's like a SIM card on the train that you can hook into. So
And
if
when-
it loses signal, it loses signal.
And you lose signal a lot on the train, don't you? Because you're out in the wild half the time. So so that's why. But, I mean, it's very well written. And it's, I think,
Oh, well, that's
a cool way to
okay
spend
then.
your working day. But it just kind of confirms what we already know.
It's a statement of the inobvious.
Yeah.
But what you do is you
Yeah.
download them first and then you watch it on
Exactly.
Well, he makes that point. He was sat next to a guy who had no problem at all because he'd downloaded it. And that's what everyone does.
Yes.
No one really would go on a journey in the train and then think, well, you know what I'll do? I'll hook up to the Wi-Fi and watch a movie.
No, don't
because you
rely
just
on it.
wouldn't. It would take you forever. And
Well,
you'd
he
go
clearly
nuts.
did.
Yeah, but he was getting paid for it.
You have to plan for a journey.
Lucky him.
Okay, silly things to write about, I suppose, but there you go. What do we go to next?
Police.
Banter police, yeah.
Christmas
so
again?
You've got your turkey in, you've ordered that, you've booked your slot to pick
Your
it
tree's
up.
been up for
Your
weeks.
tree's been up for weeks. You've lit up the whole of your village, Anne.
Yeah.
And then you go to the staff Christmas party. And what now are the regulations that Labour are going to bring in? You cannot make a flirty joke. You can't even make a joke for risk of offending someone.
Get over.
I was with a bunch of Gen Zers last night before I went out somewhere else, and they were saying, look, Claire, we're really not that woke. We really are not. And I went, OK, if I were to say X, Y or Z, I went, oh, what?
What was it? Just cheeky banter?
Yeah. I'll get absolutely lampooned if I tell you what I said.
Well, is it that bad?
No, see, I don't think it was. But then they just take things in completely the wrong way.
Yeah.
And you wonder why 50% of people are single. Because you can't have, like, a wee kind of flirt, or you can't have a wee chat, or you can't have a, you look lovely today. Or you have a bit of sparkle in your eye. Oh, I don't like the way that made me feel.
Oh,
you know? So now it's going to be...
Yes, but that would put you straight off that person, wouldn't it?
But that's the other thing. Yeah. But there's too many of them that have been put off by things that they're not equipped to deal with.
Yeah. Well, see, I wonder whether there's a reaction against that amongst even younger kids now, because our 14-year-old will come home sometimes and she'll say something that they were talking about at school, and you're like, you can't say that. You can't say that these days.
Well, so it's gone the other way.
Yeah. It's almost like there's a reaction to the woke, politically correct, call it what you like. And now the next generation of pre-Gen Z, I have no idea if they've even got a name yet.
They're not born.
But yeah, some of the stuff that our daughters like, whoa. Wait, I was like, you talk about that with your pals? Yeah.
Does she accuse you of being woke?
Yeah, I bet, yeah. Oh, come on, Dad.
But you are, Kevin.
Lighten
you are
up.
a bit woke.
No, he's not woke.
Stephen's known me a long time. He knows I'm
He's not woke.
Well, that's why you need your extra hour in bed, so you can wake up.
No, I just think this. I mean, I like a bit of banter.
So do I.
I have to say, and I am very cheeky in the office.
Yeah, he is very cheeky in the office.
I'm very cheeky in the office, especially with all the team and everything. But you see, that's a bit of fun.
But you get away with it.
I get away with it. I mean,
because
people...
he puts on the little boy lost look, don't you? He's not me, I'm a total innocent look.
Yeah, but you know I'm only joking, that's the point. It's only just messing about. Yeah.
Tell you what, though, you're not half as bad. I mean, when I worked in offices many, many years ago, the banter was different and it was a little bit more threatening.
And misogynistic.
Yeah, it was.
More misogynistic than misandrist, I would say. And it came to pass that you actually felt a bit threatened sometimes, but... it made us. I'm sure it did. It made me stronger, and it made me have the ability to actually fight back. But you need to do it with a bit of humour and a cheeky eye.
Yes,
that's the answer.
To make it very clear that it is
just
meant to be
you're not being
joke.
serious.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's creepy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you a handwriter, Kevin?
Well, sort of. But I do shorthand. I'm trained in shorthand, so now if I'm writing, I do short. But
T-line.
if I have T-line, yes. But if I have to write a card, like a Christmas card or a thank you card, or whatever, my handwriting is definitely
terrible. Mine's
deteriorated
exactly the
over the years. Yeah, just kind of get the habit.
I feel sad about that.
Because we don't do it so much.
So what's this pinned to?
So this story here is that children's handwriting is now so bad that they're saying that teenagers need, in secondary school, they should bring back handwriting lessons.
I agree.
Secondary school.
I agree.
It shouldn't just be a primary school.
I'd go in for them.
Me too, yeah.
Seriously, I would.
It's a discipline and it's worth
still something that
relearning.
you are... OK, everyone's online these days, but there are still occasions when you will need
It is nice. I have to say, I've never really thought much of it, but my cousin, Sarah, has... when she got married last year, and when she wrote all the thank you cards and things out... Blimey heck, her handwriting's beautiful.
Oh, really?
Oh, isn't that's lovely.
And it was just really nice to see.
Yeah, it's impressive and so on, because it looks like they've made the effort.
Yes.
They've really tried.
Well, it's manners, isn't it? And we can actually take this further because people aren't writing anymore. They're not reading anymore. So if you're not reading, how can you write, in fact?
That's a fair point.
You know?
And on that note, we must leave it. Thank you.
On that handwritten note.
Here's the weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We are expecting some rain around this weekend, particularly in the northwest, and it will turn windy for a time, but otherwise there's lots of dry, fine, settled weather around for this weekend. A cooler start, perhaps with some pockets of mist and fog, cloudy across parts of Sussex, Kent, East Anglia, for example. This cloud may bring some rain at times. Otherwise largely dry across much of England and Wales. A different story across western parts of Scotland, though, and Northern Ireland. Quite a wet afternoon on offer here with some heavier downpours and some fairly blustery winds in the northwest west too. But across the south, temperatures just above average for the time of year, so feeling rather pleasant where you do catch the sunshine. As we head into this evening, then, that rain is going to continue across parts of Scotland, generally clearing the far west, but still plenty of blustery showers behind that. And that rain could turn rather heavy at times too. Once again, clearing the far west of Northern Ireland, still some cloud around, but any rain generally clearing the far east. Otherwise, largely dry across much of England and Wales, still with that lingering cloud though across the southeast, which may just produce still a little bit of rain. But on the whole, it's generally turning drier as we head overnight. This frontal system, as it moves its way to the southeast, generally a weakening feature, so by the time it reaches the south, staying largely dry. And that brings plenty of clear spells overnight too. And that also means it's going to be feeling a little bit cooler than it has done over recent nights. May even just see the odd spot of frost around northern parts too. Otherwise, for Sunday, we've got high pressure building, plenty of dry, bright weather, plenty of autumnal sunshine too. We are going to see a change from the northwest though, as this next weather front slowly pushes its way in. So some quite heavy downpours of rain by the time we reach the afternoon across Northern Ireland and across western parts of Scotland. And once again, those blustery winds continuing too. Temperatures a touch down compared to today, otherwise still feeling pleasant in the sunshine.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We could be. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
My kingdom for a voice. Scientists have, I can't believe this story, scientists have incredibly recreated the voice of Richard III using both his skull shape and a knowledge of medieval speech patterns. Me neither. The result is that the king, who was famously killed at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, would have spoken in English close to that of a man from modern-day Yorkshire or Somerset. Let's take a listen.
The sun shines with no less licht and splendour, nor does it suffer any diminution of its strength.
Let's discuss this further with Yvonne Morley-Chisholm, the voice coach behind the project, who spent 10 years researching how the monarch would have sounded. Yvonne, you can probably see from my face, I have no idea how this works. Can you enlighten me as to what all this is about?
Yes, thank you very much indeed, Dawn. So yes, I had a mad idea 10 years ago. I normally work with actors where we have a recording of a historical person, and we do something called vocal profiling to train the actor who's going to be performing on stage or screen to move their tongue tip, their jaw, their lips, everything, and get behind the personality of who they're playing. We obviously have quite a lot of that missing from Richard. We don't have a recording of him, but I wondered how far we could go. And a key player in this has been and is Professor Caroline Wilkinson, who over a decade ago created his face, first of all, from his skull. Now, on the day we, as Shakespeare would say, shuffle off our mortal coil, every little dent and dimple in the bones says how fit and strong the muscles were. So I thought, OK, we know what his face could do.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning to you. So Keir Starmer says Number 10 is not plotting a war against the middle classes.
This comes as the Prime Minister took to the stage in Samoa following a meeting with the Commonwealth heads of government.
He also says now is the time for a conversation around reparation. But he says they haven't talked about money in Samoa.
Yes, no money on the table. We heard reports last week that reparations could potentially run to 18 trillion, money that we clearly do not have. But there is a line about reparatory justice. What exactly might that mean?
Keir Starmer says that Israel has the right to defend itself. That's after the Israeli government, of course, has fired a barrage of missiles on military targets across Iran in the latest escalation of the conflict. And there are fears that Tehran will retaliate.
King Charles says he hopes he survives long enough to see Samoa again as he bids farewell to the Pacific Islands.
BBC Panorama is under fire for their episode covering the Nottingham stabbings. Mother of victim Barnaby Webber calls it shameful and joins us shortly.
A treat for everyone living in the UK and elsewhere, actually, because the clocks are going to go back tonight, so it should mean an extra hour of sleep.
Hello, good morning. Lots of fine weather around this weekend, but not for all. If you want to know where the wet and windy weather's going to be, then stay tuned for all the details.
It's just gone 9 o'clock. I'm Stephen Dixon.
And I'm Anne Diamond, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Should the clocks go back at all? Should we change them twice a year? I get a bit bored with it.
Yeah, why do we still do it? I thought we did it in the sort of 1950s and everything because the farmers were very adamant they needed daylight so that they could rear the crops in the right way. But that was very much a post-war thing. And now I think we just do it out of tradition, don't we?
But everywhere does it. Doesn't it? Everywhere.
No, they don't, do they?
Yeah.
In Europe, do they do it?
Do it in Europe, yeah. And I mean,
in the States,
at the same time, they do it in the States as well. The difference in the States is it doesn't always coincide with ours. So, like New York's clocks will change. I don't know if they will change tonight or whether it's like in 2 or 3 weeks.
In China, do they do it?
That I don't know.
No,
they probably have loads of different time zones.
I'm sure they must do because it's such an enormous country.
But yeah, all of Europe will change tonight. And...
I didn't know that. I thought it was just quintessentially and quirkily British.
No. No, but it gets on my
Maybe the whole world should just go to GMT, although that would make...
Oh, well, that would... Well, yes.
Yeah. OK, that would make it complicated to read now that we do global travel.
Yes.
You know, you'd end up leaving somewhere at 6 o'clock in the evening and getting there before you left or something, wouldn't you?
It's very Doctor Who,
It's already a bit like that.
Yeah. Anyway, let's know what you think. Now let's talk about politics, should we? Because the Prime Minister has been speaking this morning and he said the upcoming budget is not a war against the middle classes. And all that follows all these recent tensions about potential tax rises this coming Wednesday and that will not, they said before the election, affect working people. So there's been a lot of confusion about what a working person actually is.
Now, he also addressed the issue of reparations, stating that conversations around reparatory justice...
Let's talk to our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Let's talk budget first and foremost, because that's what I think we care about most of all, in which we were told precisely nothing, frankly, apart from the fact it's not a war on Middle Britain.
Yes, indeed, and the conversation about what is or is not a working person has gone round and round, hasn't it? But I think what is clear is that although the government pledged that they would not put up headline rates of income tax, VAT and national insurance, they're going to be putting up plenty of other things instead because they've got this £22 billion black hole, they say. They're actually looking to raise about 40 billion.
And that will affect working Britons, that's the point.
Of course it will, of course it will. So they've ruled out those big tax rises, but things like capital gains tax likely to rise, inheritance tax likely to rise, fuel duty quite possibly will go up, clearly paid by millions of working people. And we are also hearing that although they're not going to touch employees' national insurance, they are going to put up employers' national insurance. Now, their argument is that's a tax paid by businesses. But, of course, businesses are made up of people that are looking to make profit. So if you add to business costs, there's going to be a filter through which potentially is not good for workers. So we don't know all the details, but we know it's going to be difficult. We also know that aside from these big tax cuts coming to avoid sort of major austerity again, departmental budgets are also being squeezed. And separate to that, the government is changing its fiscal rules that they took from the Conservatives about how they measure debt. And what that's going to do is let them borrow tens of billions more money to spend on things like infrastructure, to drive, they hope, long-term growth, because growth in the economy has been pretty anemic, to put it mildly, since the financial crisis. And that's one of the reasons why over the last 15 years or so, many of us are not feeling better off. In fact, quite a lot of us feeling worse off.
That borrowing, will Rachel Reeves actually go into the detail of that, do you think, in her speech?
We will have to see, but they have changed the way they measure it, because she talked about this being ironclad, these ironclad fiscal rules that they were taking from the Conservatives, because they didn't want to do anything to startle either voters in thinking that they weren't to be trusted with the economy, or the markets, given what happened with Liz Truss. But they've changed the way they're counting, basically, their assets. So they're now counting things like all the student loans, all the money that the government has loaned, much of that which won't be paid back. Things like assets they have in terms of hospitals, buildings.
But that,
they're counting all of that.
Hold on. But this is where you have to say, how can it be? So student loans, instead of being a deficit to the economy, because that's money the government has forked out, is actually an asset on the basis of what? It will be paid back with interest, except, as you say, a lot of it isn't.
Might not be paid back.
I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
There's all sorts of ways of measuring things to get a result that you want. And what I would say about student loans is that up until very recently, three-quarters of it would never be paid off. There was going to be basically a massive write-off. But the previous government, young people were paying it off over 30 years. Now they'll be paying it off over 40 years. So the chances are that people at university now are going
to live in debt.
To be living in debt, paying that money for a lot longer, and much more likely to actually pay that money back to the government.
But as you're saying,
whole thing
it depends how you account these things, and you wonder what words Rachel Reeves will use. Because if you're a loan company, you see a loan as an asset, don't you? If you're a loans company.
Yes, I suppose you do.
That's why they sell loans to each other, don't they? They see them as assets. It's an extraordinary business, but OK. So because they said during the election campaign that they would cost everything down to the absolute detail, and you just wonder if that's what we're going to get from Rachel Reeves, if she's going to cost everything or just sort of be a bit more vague about things.
Well, the budget will be accompanied by a breakdown from the Office for Budget Responsibility. That was one of the reasons why it all went so catastrophically wrong with Liz Truss's anything but mini budget, because they didn't have that forecast from the OBR. Places like the Institute for Fiscal Studies will pick it apart very quickly. So we'll have the budget on Wednesday. There'll be all the headline announcements, and then we'll get the analysis over how much worse off we're all going to be.
One of the first things the Prime Minister said when he was talking about the budget this morning was, well, of course, we've got to deal with this £22 billion black hole. Well, even that's in question, isn't it, as to where exactly it's come from, whether it was there beforehand, whether they knew about it beforehand. I mean, that's all a bit of a fudge.
I think it's fair to say that before the election, it was very, very clear, and bodies like the Institute for Fiscal Studies were talking about this a lot, that whoever was in charge after the next election was going to have to make very difficult decisions, either in terms of big tax rises or big cuts to public services. And given the state of public services, there is not much appetite for that. Now, the Conservatives took 4p off national insurance, which is a lot of money, hoping that it would persuade people to stick with them. I don't think they got really any credit for that. I don't think they called the election before people could feel the benefit of that and the economy, which is getting better. But, of course, Labour didn't want to come along and say, well, we'll reverse that, because people wouldn't like that. So it's very, very difficult. But I think Labour knew quite a lot of this before the election. But, of course, that's not how you get elected. Now, they're saying it's worse, and obviously you don't have access to everything when you're not in government. But it was always clear that it was going to be difficult. And, of course, what Labour said was that they had no plans to raise taxes beyond which they'd announced for, non-DOMs. That's all unravelling. VAT on private school fees. But, you know, here we are.
Yeah, here we are indeed. And we shall see where we are on Wednesday. Full coverage, of course, throughout the day here on GB News. Catherine, thank you.
Right, to Samoa. The King and Queen have actually said farewell to Samoa now, with the King telling leaders he hopes to survive long enough to see the country again.
Well, it comes after he delivered a landmark speech where he addressed the issue of, amongst other things, reparations.
Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker has the latest for you.
When the King and Queen arrived at Sydney Airport at the start of their 10-day tour of Australia and Samoa, it was absolutely chucking it down with rain on the tarmac. And I'm afraid to say, as the King and Queen depart Samoa, it is pretty much the same weather, biblical rainfall. But the Samoans see this as a good thing. It's a good luck charm because it means potentially there will be a good harvest this year. And the King earlier on this morning was, alongside the Queen, was at a local village where he told the villagers he hopes to survive long enough to return to Samoa. He was also made a High Chief of the local district. And as you can see, they are boarding right now the Royal Australian Air Force jet, which will take them part way back to the United Kingdom. And it has been a grueling 10 days for their Majesties, of many engagements, up to 10 engagements a day in some parts. And it has been an incredibly important trip for the King and Queen, but the King especially, because it is a trip of first. The first time he has visited a realm outside the United Kingdom where he reigns as head of state, that's Australia, but also it's the first time he has addressed the 56 Commonwealth heads of government as the institution's head, and he would have been very determined to be here. And 6 months ago we didn't know if he would be here because of his cancer diagnosis, but clearly doctors have given him the green light, and on the whole it's been a pretty successful tour despite one or two small protests. He paused his cancer treatments while he was here in Australia and Samoa. As soon as he returns to London, that cancer treatment resumes.
Oh, he's all smiles there at the end. And it looks genuine. I mean, you can never quite tell, but I think it looks
genuine.
They
looked genuinely happy throughout,
I think so.
It was lovely to see them on such good form.
Yes, I think so. I mean, the weather not very great, not very great. But at least it's warm rain. I don't mind warm rain.
No, you get the feeling that it's going to clear up quite soon, but it does look quite heavy in places, doesn't it? Anyway.
It does. Anyway.
On time zones, China has only one time zone. It's called China time or something.
Right.
I'm trying to find it. We've had Tunisia doesn't change its clocks, apparently.
No, well, the only European countries that do not observe daylight saving time, here you go, are Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, Iceland, Russia and Turkey.
Oh, right.
All the other European countries.
And somebody just got in touch from Qatar, good morning, I'm just trying to find your name, who said that they don't change their time, so tomorrow they're going to be 3 hours ahead of us.
Oh, I thought it'd be more than that.
Yes, I did too.
That's brilliant. Anyway, there you go. Right, we better check on the weather over here. Here's Honor.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We are expecting some rain around this weekend, particularly in the northwest, and it will turn windy for a time, but otherwise there's lots of dry, fine, settled weather around for this weekend. A cooler start, perhaps with some pockets of mist and fog, cloudy across parts of Sussex, Kent, East Anglia, for example. This cloud may bring some rain at times. Otherwise largely dry across much of England and Wales. A different story across western parts of Scotland, though, and Northern Ireland. Quite a wet afternoon on offer here with some heavier downpours and some fairly blustery winds in the northwest too. But across the south, temperatures just above average for the time of year, so feeling rather pleasant where you do catch the sunshine. As we head into this evening, then, that rain is going to continue across parts of Scotland, generally clearing the far west, but still plenty of blustery showers behind that. And that rain could turn rather heavy at times too. Once again, clearing the far west of Northern Ireland, still some cloud around, but any rain generally clearing the far east. Otherwise, largely dry across much of England and Wales, still with that lingering cloud, though, across the southeast, which may just produce still a little bit of rain. But on the whole, it's generally turning drier as we head overnight. This frontal system, as it moves its way to the southeast, generally a weakening feature, so by the time it reaches the south, staying largely dry. And that brings plenty of clear spells overnight too. And that also means it's going to be feeling a little bit cooler than it has done over recent nights. May even just see the odd spot of frost around northern parts too. Otherwise, for Sunday, we've got high pressure building, plenty of dry, bright weather, plenty of autumnal sunshine too. We are going to see a change from the northwest, though, as this next weather front slowly pushes its way in. So some quite heavy downpours of rain by the time we reach the afternoon across Northern Ireland and across western parts of Scotland. And once again, those blustery winds continuing too. Temperatures a touch down compared to today, otherwise still feeling pleasant in the sunshine.
Woo! A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Right, still to come. Do stay with us because we're going to be bringing you the latest on what happened overnight, particularly with Israel's attack on Iran. That's next.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
So I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm going to see your show, Behind the Shoulder Pads, one night only at the Adelphi Theatre, October the 22nd. You're talking about your extraordinary life. Stage, screen, published author, 19
TV,
books, TV, most important.
Yeah.
Is there anyone who's managed to straddle, what, 7, 8 decades in showbiz and still be at the top?
Yes, I was thinking about that the other day because somebody said, you know, the last is good. There is a Shirley MacLaine.
Sure.
She started the same time as me.
Right.
Sophia Loren.
Yeah.
She started around the same time.
She's not working much, though.
It's true, she's not, but she's still out there being, you know, a major icon. And of course, people like Dick Van Dyke, who's just almost 100.
Yeah, he's incredible,
you know,
isn't he?
I'm a mere babe next to him.
Yeah, you are. But and I was thinking about, you've written some extraordinary, wicked, waspish diaries, which of course you can because you've worked with so many people. Look at the names: Frank Sinatra, Lana Turner, Elizabeth Taylor, Dean Martin, Gregory Peck,
Richard Burton,
Paul Newman. The list goes on.
Gene Kelly,
and
my
Gene
favourite.
Kelly. Was he your favourite?
Yes.
Why?
Because I saw him in a movie when I was a little girl called For Me and My Gal with Judy Garland, and I just fell in love with him. It's such a cute movie. Well, they don't make movies like that anymore. And then I was lucky enough when I first went to Hollywood at age 20 to meet him and literally hang out with him and his friends. And then I put him in a movie with me that I produced. He played my husband in a movie called Sins. And he was wonderful. He was really wonderful.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
9:20 now. Overnight, Israel has launched a barrage of missile strikes across Iran. It's the latest escalation in the Middle East conflict.
And this comes as Tehran has reportedly threatened its citizens with lengthy prison sentences if they share footage of the strikes.
Well, meanwhile, the Prime Minister urged democracies to work together and aim for de-escalation. That was at his news conference earlier on this morning.
Israel does have the right to defend itself.
Well, that was Keir Starmer speaking in Samoa just a couple of hours ago. The former British Army spokesperson, Major Mike Shearer, joined us too to have his say.
There's no question that the Israelis are on the front foot here. And the only reason this problem in the Middle East has persisted for the decades that it has is because just as Israel get close to completing and finishing the problem, they're always stopped by the United States. So I would say that Israel are absolutely on the front foot, and they should go on. I know that they've said that their strikes for the time being is done, but I suspect there's a bit more to come yet.
Where does this leave us here in the UK, Mike, in terms of heightened tensions here, possibility of, especially if we get in, or as we are to an extent anyway, but more involved in this situation, does this put us on a heightened footing here?
Yeah, I suspect it probably, the truth is it probably does. But I'm afraid that is our own internal security issues. Let's not forget, despite the general tone of the international community, it would appear that Israel and the IDF are the perpetrators here. Let's not forget who started this. Let's not forget the 7th of October. And then immediately on the 8th, when Hezbollah joined in. I have researched and researched. Look, I've been dealing with the law of armed conflict within customary international law fairly much all my life, because nobody wants to get that wrong when you're holding a weapon. And I can assure you that Israel has not broken any customary international laws. And indeed, the serious part of that with regarding this conflict is the law of armed conflict. They're perfectly within their right to be doing what they're doing. And they are responding. They are not the aggressor.
So what happens next? Do we wait for other countries, I mean ourselves, America, to make some sort of a response? Or are we just sitting back and waiting to see what happens next?
Well, I know that there, if my memory serves me right, I think there are peace talks planned for this weekend in Qatar. And I suspect people will be worrying whether this now puts that on ice. I suspect not. Look, peace could occur tomorrow if Hezbollah and Hamas put their weapons down, Hamas release the hostages, and they present themselves and say, we're done. Of course, that is not likely to happen. But there is the peace formula right there. It's not complicated. Again, the noise from the international community is that Israel is endangering civilian life. No, they're not. It is Hamas and Hezbollah that are endangering civilian life. You know, the ugly term of collateral damage, it is a thing, and it is permitted within the law of armed conflict to have civilian casualties if it fits within the stated military objective and military advantage. And everything that I've seen so far says that it is.
OK, fascinating to hear the Major's perspective on that. I want to turn your attention now to the stabbings in Nottingham. Do you remember those? Only 18 months ago, heading towards 18 months ago. And Ian Coates lost his life. He was a 65-year-old. But also, I mean, and that was a real tragedy in and of itself, of course. But I think what particularly hit home was these two beautiful teenagers, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Barnaby Webber, who lost their lives in that stabbing. Absolutely appalling to see these two young lives snuffed out. Anyway, the mother of one of those teenagers, Barnaby, has branded an episode of Panorama as shameful.
She's Emma Webber. Her 19-year-old son, Barnaby, was killed last year. And she says the families were not properly consulted about making the panorama at all.
Yeah, well, it featured an interview with the killer's family. And that's raised, some questions about the way it was put together. However, I mean, it's salt in the wound now. It's been nominated for a journalism award. However, it's Scoop of the Year.
Which
Doesn't that just seem distasteful?
Totally. Totally. Joining us now is Emma Webber, and a very good morning to you. And before we even start, you know, just seeing you, our profound sympathies for what happened to Barnaby. But can you tell us what your main worries are about this panorama? What's your real problem with it?
Yeah, we've been. I'm speaking on behalf of all three families. We actually met yesterday with our legal team who are supporting us. There's so much, but concentrating on Panorama. We understand the freedom of press, the freedom to report, and the importance of particularly investigative journalism, especially given the enormity of what's happened to us and the failures. But with this particular programme, it's where to start, where to end. They didn't consult with us in any way, shape or form. They didn't inform us that this was in the making, and we were told, just to give context of dates, on the 26th of July I received a phone call from Navtal, who's the lead journalist involved on this. So the 26th of July was the first time we'd been told that it was happening, and it was due to air on the 12th of August. And it was already in the can. It was, as Nav told me, it's with legals now, and Emma, it's going to answer all of the big questions. It's a great piece of journalism, and you know, of course, naturally, there's so many things that we've got concerns with and failures that we were hopeful that it would address more than what it actually ended up addressing, which is the failings of the Mental Health Trust in his care over quite a few years. That information was all already in our want anyway, because the CQC report had come out, which is the urgent Section 48 report that was done into his care. And the NHS England independent investigation is due out, and it's being worked on at the moment. So we knew about a lot of this. But as soon as I asked why we weren't involved in it in any way or informed, we were pretty much told, well, you had your say when the BBC did The Big Cases, which is an extended news piece that aired in January and was filmed throughout the end of last year. And then they dropped the bombshell that, well, actually, people speaking for the first time when I asked who it was, or the Callaghan family, and I think the penny dropped then that. And the fact that it's now gone on to have the word scoop is they had the scoop of getting that family to speak for the first time. And of course, again, as much as I don't like it, they have a right to speak and to be heard if people want to listen to them. But there were so many factual inaccuracies and omissions that what was portrayed was a very imbalanced and sensationalised, we believe, piece of programme making. And we've gone down the route of complaining to the BBC. They've behaved appallingly and continue to behave appallingly. We're having automated emails saying that there's a lot of complaints coming in at the moment, and this will be addressed in due course. And they've now got until Tuesday. I think the 20 days is up, where we need to have some form of response, which we're not hopeful for. So we are going directly to press complaints.
I mean, it's very difficult, Emma, isn't it, in all of this? And I mean, heck, no one would envy you your position. But it's that whole business of trying to tell all sides of the story. But in that way, what cannot be forgotten is what sensitivity needs to be placed around you and the families of Grace and the families of Ian Coates as these absolute innocents in this horrific crime.
Yeah, we are the surviving victims of this, but like you said, two beautiful children almost were slaughtered by somebody who we do not believe was so diminished in his responsibility and his illness that he didn't know what he was doing. So there's so much, as has been widely documented, we're having such a fight. And the last thing that I feel we should be dragged through is this, with the response that I got back, or our lawyers got back, from Karen Whiteman, who's the editor of Panorama, sort of said that they felt that there was a portrayal of the failings wreaked upon Valdo Callaghan, his family and us. And I find it a huge insult that we're grouped together as potential, victims with that family. I mean, they've destroyed everything. and the detail within the programme was so flawed that it's given a portrayal that isn't balanced, and I cannot understand why we weren't. Where was the duty of care to at least inform us prior that this was happening? They wouldn't let us see the programme before it aired. They wouldn't even give us level of detail. And so to then be made aware over the last couple of days that the Press Gazette have nominated them as Scoop of the Year, it's painful. It feels distasteful, which is probably the word I could use on air. That this is my beautiful boy that didn't stand a chance, and nor did Grace, and nor did Ian, and so many failures, not just by the mental health trust, but by 2 police forces at least, have failed us with all these missed opportunities. And that's not journalism. That's just gratuitous, sensationalised portrayal of.
It's what you said. You are the living victims, and it seems to me, it seems to so many really experienced television journalists that I know and who are backstage here behind us. They cannot understand why you weren't informed, kept fully informed, because it just seems to so many people that you've had to fight for justice, and you have actually been denied a lot of justice all the way along the way, right down to how the court proceedings were taken against Valdo Calacane, to his sentencing, and now to the way the media is portraying it. It seems that you're still having to fight for justice, and you're the living victims.
Yeah, it feels, Anne, that it feels as though everywhere, everything, every opportunity, all of the reports, all of the investigations, all of the alleged professionals and decision makers have failed. And without us constantly fighting and picking everything apart, and thank goodness we've had the offer of support from the legal team we've got, because none of us would be able to mentally, emotionally or financially do what we're doing now, where we're hopeful for a statutory inquiry. So, those that have failed, the professionals that have failed, the medical professionals, the legal professionals, will be held to account and will be compelled to give full disclosure. We on the back of this Panorama programme, our lawyers reached out, as the Calacane family had offered. They wanted to help. Apparently, they want an inquiry as well. They readily shared medical records and details with the press, with the Panorama team, but they stonewalled us in us taking up on their offer to provide us with information so that we can help to understand and heal and make sense of some of this. But the mum's a registered nurse. I do not believe for a single second, none of us believe that she didn't know her son had that illness. She tried to intervene in a number of his 4 sectionings. And I think that the family have questions to answer, but I'm not on a witch hunt for them. Can't have any sympathy for them, unfortunately. I don't have that in me. Maybe I wish I was a better person, but what I do want is answers, and I do want accountability, and we all want this to begin. We want the beginning of the closure, so we want the answers. We only have our truth. We've got nothing else, and I hope people don't think I'm coming on constantly onto the TV to whinge and moan and can't let it lie. But I would say to anybody who's a parent or anyone who's got a loved one, imagine what we have to think about every night when we go to bed, and what happened to our boy, and what that monster did to him, and all of the questions that haven't been answered about his alleged drug use, about his connections with gangs in London, about all of the prior unprosecuted assaults on students, on other innocent people, including a month before the factory workers that he assaulted, where the Leicestershire police did nothing after they attended the scene. We have to live with all of that, knowing that Barney, Grace and Ian should still be alive. Had all of people done their jobs.
There are a lot of questions to be answered.
Many still.
We are out of time, but I'm not going to let you go without, because that picture of, and as someone who lived and worked and was a student in Nottingham myself, it was so shocking. But that picture of all 3, if we can bring that back up, absolutely haunts me. and this is the first time we've talked, so I just want you to tell me, just briefly, who Barney was.
Oh, he was everything. He was challenging, he was naughty sometimes, he was funny, but he was kind, and he was the most genuine person. He was loving his life, and he was living his life, and he loved that city, he loved that university, he loved the friends he'd made there, he loved the sport, he adored cricket, and he loved his family, and we love him, and we miss him so much that I don't think there's any words that could ever convey how much that boy is loved and missed. But what we will do is we will get justice, and we will get accountability. And it isn't a witch hunt. It's if you fail at such an egregious level as some of those doctors and police officers, and in our opinion lawyers did, and doctors, expert doctors, they must be held to account, because it will happen again. It has happened again. But if there's some way that we can have our little bit in our country to create more safety for Barneys and Graces and Ians and all of their families, then we will do that, because that's one thing we can do.
And
excuse me, sorry.
No, we understand it entirely.
Emma, just to remind everybody watching right now, is that those three beautiful people were killed in the most savage way you can think of, and yet Valdo Callicane was charged with manslaughter and admitted manslaughter, and was allowed to go as manslaughter, when it very clearly to any human being was more than that.
This is an individual that had a rucksack full of weapons that he had put together over many, many months. He prowled, he chose his victims, he hid in the shadows, he chose people that had no chance of defending themselves, and it wasn't a rageful, it was a calculated, savage, monstrous attack. He wasn't in the throes of some great seizure or episode. The eminent Dr. Nigel Blackwood, who ironically is a CPS expert witness, said that he was in an extended period of psychosis for the entire time. He managed to complete his university degree a year before in a 2-1 in mechanical engineering at Nottingham, but he was still in his episode of psychosis then. The reason he was calm was because he was in psychosis. The reason that he had attacked others was it's just making it fit to make it go away. And Callicane is a patient. He's not even a prisoner. There's no penal element. Yes, they say he's likely to be indefinitely detained. He won't be unless we make him the next Ian Brady. Because as his brother already said so painfully for our son Charlie to hear at the end of that Panorama programme, he's responding to the medication in his hospital, and he's got his brother back now. And the fact that Panorama allowed that to go in, and the fact that they ignored our request to put a disclaimer when we asked them to make it obvious, or make the public aware that the victims' families have not been involved in any part of that programme making. They just ignored us. They didn't even have the courtesy to respond to that one. Wes Streeting wrote to the Director General of the BBC with his concerns when he found out a week before that this was airing and that we hadn't been involved. That there's no duty of care to us, despite what they say in their right to reply statement. And I can't believe that that's our BBC that have done that to us. You would think that Panorama would have learned from past mistakes.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Anyway, it's my opinion, and I appreciate people are entirely due and reasonable to have theirs, but they haven't lost their son in, like you say, such an awful manner that haunts us every second of every day.
I'm sure it does.
But we will fight on, and we won't let these wrongs not be righted, because we at least owe him, Grace and Ian, that.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate you talking to us, Emma. Thank you very much indeed.
I really appreciate you. Yeah, I really appreciate you giving me your time. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, just heartbreaking.
Well, as you can imagine, we have contacted the BBC for comment, but they are yet to respond.
But on the issue, they have previously stated that we have the deepest sympathy for the families, and the Panorama team have been extremely mindful of the sensitivities in handling of this programme. They've been in contact with the bereaved families to tell them about the programme and provide details of its editorial focus. This investigation, which is very much in the public interest, examines a decline in the mental health of Valdo Calocane and asks whether there were systemic failings. The documentary has been produced in accordance with the BBC's editorial guidelines. Any complaints will be looked at according to our complaints procedure, which at the moment is sending an automated email out to the family. I think she said Tuesday. Is it this Tuesday?
Mm-hmm.
It will be the 20 days when they should get a response. Let's hope they do.
I think they should be seen to do better, don't you? Anyway.
It's just talking to her that way is just heartbreaking.
It is, of course it is.
Right, we're going to take a short break. Back with some health news for you in just a moment.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
I'm joined now by an acknowledged authority on Ludwig van Beethoven. He's already written 7 books on the subject, and next week his 8th is released. It's called In Search of Beethoven, and it stands apart as a deeply personal account of John Suchet's relationship with the great composer as he follows his footsteps from Bonn to Vienna. Yes, I introduce author, journalist and classic FM presenter John Suchet.
Hello, Mike.
It's delightful to have you here, and you have, as I say, written now 8 books on Beethoven. So the question is, why Beethoven?
Well, the word that is often used that I don't like is obsession, obsessive, because somehow there's something not quite right about that. The word that I use is passion. I have a passion for this man's life and music that began, I suppose, around 50 years ago, sometime in my early 20s. I can't remember the exact moment. He kind of crept up on me, and suddenly, as I was a journalist, TV journalist all my life, but before that I was a failed musician. I wanted to be a professional musician, but fortunately for the world of music, I realised I didn't have the talent. But this man's music crept up on me, and I knew from then that it would not go away, it would only increase, and that is what's happened. There are other composers I will listen to, minor names like Mozart, Wagner, Haydn, but Beethoven just does it for me. I was highly educated musically at school because I loved it, to the extent that I wanted to turn professional, but as I say, I didn't have the talent, but that has stayed with me. I read music, I understand music, as you say, I play the trombone, in those days to quite a high level.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark Meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Budget Day on GB News on Wednesday. Stay with us all day for the most anxiously anticipated budget in a generation.
Morning through to evening, we'll be here with insight
and analysis, crunching the numbers
as we work out the cost to the country and, most importantly, to you.
Because the Chancellor has a bill to pay. The question is,
who's going to pay it? Budget Day all day Wednesday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
9:45 now. This might make you itch a little bit this morning. The number of scabies cases has risen across the UK over recent months.
Now, you're going to be asking, what is scabies? I had to ask that myself. Let's find out. Because if left untreated, the mites which cause it could cause sores and serious complications like septicemia.
Let's talk to GP Dr David Lloyd. Morning to you, David. Is this a sexually transmitted disease? Is that how we class it?
No, I think we classify it as a disease of close contacts. Yes, sexually transmitted can be that you're, in the same bed with your partner, and that's how you transmit it. It is close contact. So it's families, it's people who are living together in shared accommodation, and each infected individual can probably infect 2 to 4 others. So it's close contact rather than sexual.
So it's. When we call it a disease, it is actually caused by a mite, is it?
Yes. So your viruses and your bacteria are 2 groups of common ways of getting infections. But this is actually a tiny little animal. And if you Google it, you get some fairly horrific pictures of the tiny animal. It looks horrid. Yes, it's a little animal that burrows into the skin. The trouble we have as doctors is that it presents with itching. And itching is a common symptom. So you may you may itch for 2 to 4 weeks before any sort of rash appears, which makes the diagnosis sometimes difficult to make. But it's something that does happen every winter in the winter because we're all clustered together. So I don't think we need to panic that this is some massive pandemic. It's not like that.
But it is on the rise.
Yes, so every autumn and winter it does tend to rise because of the cold weather, because your skin gets drier, and because we're all clustered together at home.
Is there an embarrassment about coming forward with something like this? Is this part of the issue, or do people simply not know what they've got? I think that traditionally it's said that it is embarrassing and that people don't want to come forward. But nowadays, I think most people will come forward. They come forward for everything nowadays. So itching is a troublesome symptom, and it will eventually lead you to the doctor.
And what's the treatment?
So the treatment's horrid as well. So you have to cover yourself from top to toe in a cream, and if you wash yourself in the 12 hours that you've got to keep the cream on, you've got to reapply. You've got to put all your clothes in the washing machine at 60 degrees, all your sheets, and you've got to treat everybody in the family and sexual contacts in the last 8 weeks. So it's a bit of a faff treating it. And the trouble is the itch doesn't go away straight away. So you're left with it. You can sometimes go on itching for 2 or 3 weeks after you've successfully got rid of the mite. And so you've got that as well. So it's sometimes it's not easy to diagnose. You've got to just treat blind and then just hope it goes away. So in terms of managing it, it can be quite complicated and challenging.
Now, I know a lot of people at home are going to be saying, what on earth are you talking about this at this time in the morning? But it is important for us to know and to know to do something about it.
Yes, I mean, it's very rarely does it progress. You talked about septicemia. Any skin condition where you can get breakages in the skin, potentially bugs can get in and cause more serious infections. And there is this very rare Norwegian scabies, which everybody gets worried about, where you get if someone's got immunocompromised body, traditionally people with HIV, you can get a massive eruption all over the body, and that's a pretty horrid thing to have. Oh. But that's really rare. I've never seen Norwegian scabies.
We have got to leave it there. We're out of time. Good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
Yes.
We're going to have a good scratch. We're back.
Important to know.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Catherine Richards and Jake Singleton-Hill featured on the reality show Love is Blind.
Well, Catherine and Jake are joining us now in the studio for Saturday Morning Live. Thank you very much for joining us. And this is perhaps not the end result that people might have thought that they'd be seeing at this point, because you were both on the show, but you didn't fall in love in the pods, did you?
No,
we didn't.
I rejected him.
You guys look great together.
Yeah.
Very happy as well. It seemed like you guys were really strong, and it almost seemed like Freddie, after he admitted to you that he'd cheated in the past.
I actually respected the fact that he told me up front. I didn't even want to have that conversation, obviously. That was a conversation that we got told to talk about. And I respected his decision, but I think he felt that I was holding this grudge towards him that she really doesn't like, and which was not, and he knew this, because off camera we had many conversations where I was like, thank you for owning up, like, we can just move on from this. But if anything, I think he just felt guilty the whole entire time. and he put that on me, which is fine, but yeah, there's obviously a lot that people don't see.
So for viewers who don't know, Love is Blind is where you go and seek love and romance, but you don't see who you're speaking to, right?
No.
So, Jake, why did you go on the show?
My parents actually met in a very similar way. So my stepdad was texting my mum that he'd basically stolen the number off of a friend because the friend had met my mum in Blackpool, and they were texting for like 6 months. They'd never met. So that premise of how they got together and the marriage that they had was stunning. And to build a relationship not based on looks before you met, I just found that just incredible.
So do you believe in that concept? Is it lust or love at first sight?
It's weird.
It's a bit of both.
I think, it's definitely a bit of both. And I always say, as you get older, your looks will change, but your personality will stay the same.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We've been asking today, can Keir Starmer's government smash the gangs? Is the result so far? 98% of you say no, I think. Is that? Or yes, say yes. 2% of you say no. That's very unusual. Anyway, we'll bring the full results in Nana's show later on.
Right, just before we say goodbye, and thank you very much for being with us this morning, here's the Great British Giveaway.
We could be delivering the perfect Christmas to you this year. First, we'll give you £20,025 in tax-free cash.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good morning and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. We are expecting some rain around this weekend, particularly in the northwest, and it will turn windy for a time, but otherwise there's lots of dry, fine, settled weather around for this weekend. A cooler start, perhaps with some pockets of mist and fog, cloudy across parts of Sussex, Kent, East Anglia, for example. This cloud may bring some rain at times. Otherwise largely dry across much of England and Wales. A different story across western parts of Scotland, though, and Northern Ireland. Quite a wet afternoon on offer here with some heavier downpours and some fairly blustery winds in the northwest too. But across the south, temperatures just above average for the time of year, so feeling rather pleasant where you do catch